Comments from the public not related to items on the agenda?
Fox sparrows at our bird feeder.
Very nice. Anyone's in the Burlington area, the Harlequin ducks are still at Oak Ledge, which is
Yeah, my wife was telling me
kidding.
about those
So,
yesterday.
yeah,
More than one.
two males, which is really kind of wild.
Oh, that's great.
Just a couple of things to that I'm going to change around in the agenda. I got a late request from the V.S.A to add a new member. I think that'll be fine to add in. It won't take all that much time. And then I had sent out an email about executive session at the end, and I think we'll actually have two permits to discuss in that. We are going to be challenged, I think, with having a quorum at that time. We're missing Paul and Allie, and Carla is going to have to recuse herself for that. So we may be able to have a little discussion, but we might not be able to finalize those at that time. So. All right, I guess a quick, let's see, do we even have me, Carla? We don't even have a quorum right here to approve the minutes, so we'll move on for now, and I will pass it to you, Secretary Moore.
Wow.
Sure. So I thought I could provide just a brief legislative update, although we'll let Andrea speak to some of the more fish and wildlife specific initiatives. I can talk to some of the broader agency work, and then a little bit of a federal update and sort of what we're watching and where things currently stand. So in terms of the legislature, the first thing out of the gate generally when we talk is about the budget. The governors recommend for this agency for FY26 is essentially what I would call a level service budget. So, no really significant new initiatives, very modest addition of a couple of staff positions, and can talk about where those would be. But by and large, it's kind of staying the course we are currently on. For perspective, the agency's FY26 recommend is $337 million. That's up from about $125 million when I started in this position 8 years ago. A lot of that increase is federal funding, particularly in the water infrastructure space, but also includes some work that FPR is leading under the Inflation Reduction Act related to forest health, which is certainly on our watch list in terms of the priorities of the new administration. The place we are looking to add a couple of staff positions this year is around the CAFO program, Concentrated Animal Feeding Operations, which is ag water quality. As some of you may be aware, there's what's called a dedelegation petition pending with the Environmental Protection Agency right now. It was filed by the Conservation Law Foundation about 3 years ago. In identifying what they perceive as deficiencies in our ag water quality program, EPA has agreed with some of the concerns CLF raised, and we are in the process of directing a corrective action plan to deal with those. But one of the biggest deficiencies, everyone agreed, is we don't have enough people to do that work. And so the governor's budget includes 2 new positions to help staff out a CAFO program, a commitment to redirecting an existing position within DEC into the CAFO program, and then some resources to help us get that regulatory program spun up. So that's all kind of happening. Other major legislative initiatives this year, I would, point to one in particular that may be of interest to this group is around chlorides and trying to come up with a program that provides some incentives, particularly for private contractors to reduce chloride applications. There's a very successful model that we've been looking to in New Hampshire, where contractors are given a liability protection against slip and fall claims if they are following a set of best management practices. This bill has both Natural Resources in the Senate and the House Environment Committee has spent a significant portion of their time this year on that piece of legislation. I'm not sure there's a clear path forward for it this year, but I believe there will be this biennium. And obviously knowing the increasing challenge that chlorides is presenting, particularly to a number of our smaller streams, this could have a potentially important impacts or benefits to aquatic organisms. So that is a piece we've been really engaged on. There's plenty to fill our days at the legislature. There's also work being done around PFAS. There were a number of changes looked at related to the use value appraisal program, which are current use for forest land in particular. And while that discussion has been very active, I don't necessarily anticipate there will be any changes to the UVA program made this year during the legislative session, but again, maybe something that comes up next year. And then we've provided a set of updates around Act 59, which is the 30 by 30 and 50 by 50 conservation bill. The legislature is letting that work progress as directed by Act 59, and we are just starting the work of the conservation plan, having completed the inventory of conserved lands and sent that over to the legislature this fall. We're now shifting into the actual planning process, and there will be lots of opportunities for public engagement over the next 6 to 9 months. And we have let the legislature know we need a bit more time than was originally envisioned in that legislation, which would have had us deliver the state conservation plan by the end of this calendar year, and have laid out a schedule that actually extends to the end of June of 26. But so that work is underway, and I hope many of you will look for opportunities to participate in it as it moves forward. I'll let Andrea in a moment speak to the specific fish and wildlife pieces of legislation. But before sort of passing you the talking stick, just say a few words about federal uncertainty. And I think the uncertainty is really the key there. That obviously there's a lot of talk in that space. There's been a raft of executive orders, including ones yesterday that seem to implicate our climate superfund law as a state, as well as potentially our participation in the regional greenhouse gas initiative. We are coordinating closely with the Attorney General's office. She has filed a number of appeals of different particularly problematic changes that appear to violate one or more legal thresholds. And largely the litigation she is joined in with a number of other states' attorneys general has stayed many of the most problematic challenges. It's also resulted in a number of our funding accounts that were frozen in the early days of the administration being sort of returned to service. So we are able to continue that work and make draws against those funds. And in terms of the practical on the ground effects we're seeing right now, I think they are as much as anything about how we help partner organizations manage the uncertainty. One of the examples I've pointed to several times is a conversation I had with the executive director of the Friends of the Winooski River that has a significant dam removal project planned for this summer on the Stevens Branch. They have an estimate of about it's a $350,000 job, and they have $30,000 in the bank. And so how to give them the assurance they need to move forward, knowing we can't fully guarantee that all of the federal funding committed to every good project in the state this summer will materialize. I also am really concerned that this could cause people to take a step back from some of this implementation work, and that could become its own self-fulfilling prophecy where if we're not spending the money, it will be pointed to as a reason to pull the money back. So we are actively working to put in place some strategies to, as I say, help manage that risk. I don't think we can fully assume that risk, but certainly believe there is a role for this agency to play in making sure these important restoration projects, habitat projects, water quality projects are able to move forward as best as possible this summer. The federal FY26 budget process is just getting underway, and I think that is when we will start to get a clearer sense as to the implications for changes in federal funding to this agency. Currently, our budget is over 55% federal funds, but a lot of that is these bipartisan infrastructure law and Inflation Reduction Act monies. Our core budget is more along the lines of about $200 million and about a third federal funds. Some of the federal funds I think are safe, things like Pittman-Robertson and Dingell-Johnson money, where it's much harder to sort of get in there and do different things with them, given the level of commitment. Other places there's more risk and flexibility, and those are places we are actively watching, but there's just right now we don't know what we don't know, and so focused on trying to make sure we get as much good work done on the ground this summer as possible.
Yeah, thank you. So challenging times for everyone.
Yeah.
Questions for Secretary Moore?
Maybe if Andrea wants to touch on the department
Sure.
legislative initiatives too, and then
Yeah.
if there are bigger picture questions.
Well, I'll start with H230, which is our policy initiative bill. And thank you to Alan for testifying, I think last week on that. I watched that. That was great. Appreciate the support on that. And that bill kind of covers a lot of different aspects of the department, but most specifically germane to this this committee. It will give us the ability to protect reptiles and amphibians better, and then also protect keeping the knowledge of specific T&E locations when we go through the permit process. And so that's been testified on in the committee several times because it does touch a lot of different things. I think the House Environment Committee is asking for a lot of outside testimony just on the different components of the bill, but it's moving forward. And I do want to share that yesterday, John and I were at the co-op unit meeting at UVM, and we were able to hear from a student who was working on a project on spotted turtles that was put into testimony. Luke Groff went in and testified on that project and made a really nice connection for the committee on like actual on the ground important work that would be done as the passing of that bill. So hopeful that that will move forward in the House soon, and it sounds like it will. H231 is another bill from the department, and it's more of our housekeeping kind of technical corrections bill. And that will be walked through in the Senate tomorrow morning, which is also great because we would like that to pass and be enacted this summer. Other things that we're working on or we have been asked to testify on in the House committee is H473, which is looking at a feasibility study to reintroduce catamounts, mountain lions in the state. The organization Panthera has approached us and approached the legislature about looking into this feasibility study, but notably, all of our neighboring states and provinces are not supportive of this, and so it would be really difficult, I think, to move forward with reintroducing mountain lions in Vermont if our neighboring states are not on board. We will also be testifying on H326 in the House Ag Committee, and that is looking at the ban of rodenticides. And the way that the bill is currently written, I think needs a little massaging. And so I know John and our fur bearer biologist, Bree Furphies, are going in and talking with House Ag about that. And then as the Secretary mentioned, there's a number of bills looking at state lands and UVA, which will have implications, of course, to how we manage habitat for our species. It's kind of the quick and dirty of the legislature right now.
Who are Panthera and where are they based? They must be national or regional?
They're international. It's an international organization that's committed to, I think, the conservation of big cats all over the world. I think the woman that has presented to us is from New York City. She has a background working for, I think, the state of Pennsylvania as a bear biologist, and is kind of leading the charge with a couple other scientists about the reintroduction.
Has she got a positive response from any of the states or provinces she's working with?
Not that I have heard. I think Ontario said they may be interested, but we haven't seen anything that's concrete. And also Ontario is huge, so that's a very different situation.
Yeah, we probably have them already.
They might just don't know.
And thank you on, what was it, H238?
230. Yep.
230. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
thank you for moving that.
yeah, no, and I can't take any credit for that. That's all of the work that was done in previous years because that bill's been tossed around for a while.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. Well, we appreciate it.
And is that one's with the Senate Natural Resources Committee?
No, it's still in House Environment right now. But it looks like sounds like everything is okay with that. I know that they're just trying to make sure they talk to everyone. So.
Yeah.
Before they.
It never hurts to reach out to your legislators and express support for things like that.
Yeah, there was actually, that would be very helpful because I know that there was some confusion on the committee whether Fish and Wildlife Act, the department actually supported the bill, which boggles my mind because it is a bill that we introduced. And so I've written a letter of support to the committee, but any other outside support would be welcome and helped.
Yeah, I was to say, Andrea, would you be willing to circulate the letter of support you wrote just so folks could see how you?
Sure. Yeah, sure. I mean, it's very simple, but of course I can send that out.
And that's Amy Sheldon committee.
Yeah.
Right. And she's my representative.
Oh, well.
There you go.
Okay.
The one thing that I would say, if you are sending a note that you're maybe asking Amy to send to the whole committee, I found it really interesting that a lot of the conversation came up with just concerns about the housing shortage in Vermont and whether or not this bill was going to have impacts on housing developments. And so, I basically tried to tell the committee that, there were, very few developments, maybe any, that we've actually stopped here.
Yeah.
It's really, doing the avoid, minimize, mitigate process. And, but, essentially, trying to, maybe take that housing versus endangered species conservation out of their minds.
Well, yeah, and I think you did a great job. Both you and Jamie did a really nice job of answering those questions and indicating how the threatened and endangered species that we're talking about are very habitat specific and for the most part are on state lands and really are not, from what I understand from John, your experience in the history of our permitting process, we haven't stopped any development.
In 30 some years, I'm not aware of any instance where the presence of a listed species prevented a project from being permitted and moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
It's a pretty good track record of problem solving.
Yeah, I mentioned that to Chair Sheldon the next day because she wasn't in the room, I think,
right, for
part of your testimony, and she was like, "They asked that," and so again, it's like I think there's some miscommunication in that committee, and so any support that outside organizations can provide would be helpful. Hi, Roz.
Hi, everyone. Just to add in on that note is, first of all, to thank the HERP-SAG committee, or HERP-SAG for, they were sort of the impetus behind H230 to begin with, in terms of protecting non-T&E amphibians and reptiles. So it really kind of emanated from SAG to begin with and went from there. So just want to acknowledge and appreciate them getting that going with Jim's leadership on that committee, in that advisory group. And then the question about the housing, I think that's come up during other testimony as well. So I think it's just on their minds no matter what. And so then we just need to be explicit that this bill actually doesn't intersect with that issue, and that it's not, this one wasn't even particularly about E&T, although there was a component just strengthening E&T protections as far as transport and import and export goes, but that this bill wasn't actually going to be part of it wasn't adding anything to the regulatory process. And so I think we probably just need to keep including that, even if it's obvious to us, so that they know it's not intersecting with that concern.
Thanks, Roz.
Thank you. Some of the species names have changed recently, and we could send you an email. I brought a copy of the names that have changed. One is a rat snake, and we're talking about rat snake today, now central rat snake. But I can send copies out of those changes if people want those.
Yeah,
That would be useful.
that would be helpful. We, in our housekeeping bill, we had to change names of birds that have changed
Oh, yeah.
since we.
Those bird people are wild.
Splitters,
Yeah, we don't
splitters
have
and clumpers, they have to do something to keep it here.
Okay, send it out. You want one too?
No, I
Or
would,
as long as they get it?
yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Yeah.
Actually, if you do have one, because I can then pass it to
Oh, I
Charles
can
Martin,
give you-
who's our deputy, and sort of spends his time in the state house.
Andrea, I was kind of curious about the rodenticide bill. I mean, is that the anticoagulant? Okay, and
Yeah, and so I think the way that the bill's written right now is an all-out ban, thank you, on all rodenticides. So the first generation, second generation, and then I guess there's a third type that I can't remember its name, with some specific carve-outs.
Mhm.
And I think we're thinking of, because right now the way that second generation rodenticide is limited to only licensed applicators, the sale of it. If that was extended to first generation as well, I think that would be something that would be a little easier to
mhm,
export. And we just want to make sure that we're in line with the Agency of Ag,
mhm.
make our recommendation.
Have you been keeping track of what's going on in other states? I mean, it seems like it's been a big deal in Mass for a long time, and
No, I haven't, but we were in a meeting on Friday, and Jill from Audubon mentioned that she had been looking into that, and so I need to connect with her before I be going. That's a good reminder.
Does anybody know the password to get into the email? Maybe get online?
I think it's you're using guest.
Yeah.
It usually just goes right
Yeah,
on.
or maybe state guest, all one
I
word.
got National Life Gas.
No, you want like SOV guest.
Has a little lock on it. And it wants a password, so.
Try state guest, all one word, all lowercase.
I'm on SOV guest.
It's not asking, well,
Well,
something's happening.
I mean, I've been here a few times before, so it's possible
might-
I've got a stored
Yeah.
password. But any other questions for the commissioner or secretary? Well, thanks so much.
Thank you for having me.
Good luck with the rest of the session.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate all of your work.
All right. So I don't know, John, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Well, maybe I'll start by yielding to Roz, because I think she had a couple of things that she wanted to update folks on, and then I can offer a couple of things to fill in the gaps.
Okay. Yeah, I think the legislation has all been covered pretty well. If there's no more questions for that. And regarding the more relevant picture on funding, we did get appropriation for the full year for the state wildlife grants, which is fun, is our biggest funder for all the non-game work we do with all of you. And the only thing is we were glad through the continuing resolution to get this year's full funding. We didn't, for a while, we weren't sure that was going to happen. So everything's full steam ahead for now. The only caveat is that they approved a lower budget. Will be about, well, with match, it would be 50,000 less than last year. And last year's was already level funding. So with increases in healthcare and cost of living and all of that, we were already kind of struggling. And so now we'll continue to be needing to look for ways to spend less. It's still doable, I think, you know, but we're keeping an eye on that. This was just news that came in yesterday of what our appropriations were, our allocations were. So we'll be trying to save, and again, I'll follow my predecessor in saying match is really even more important the less dollars we get, so that we're not drawing as heavily on our non-game funds, which are already used for a bunch of things in order to fulfill that match. As much volunteer match as we can get is going to help the overall budget, because we don't end up coming up with that 35% match for the state wildlife grants, just with volunteer hours. So then we have to fill in with our non-game fund. So anything you can do. I was going to bring paper copies to the meeting today, but I can't be there. So if you can hop online, or if you need me to send out a reminder of what you have to do, it's pretty quick. You sign up with a login, and then it's pretty straightforward. And then there's not a lot of updates with SWAP. John Cart's away, which is great because he really deserves it. The database has been the holdup in trying to establish this new database that will allow people to look online, and it's interactive, and we'll be able to update it between the 10-year plans. It'll be a great thing. We rely on our IT department to do that work, and they are kind of constantly in lacking capacity for all the work that's handed over to them. So it's taken a while, but they do, John told me not too long ago that they do finally have like a draft that they sent him, or a draft database that they will need to receive some feedback about and still do some work on. But at least there's progress. For a while there, we couldn't tell when they were going to get that to us. So they found the time, and it's moving along. The taxa teams are needing that to be up and ready to go in order to enter their threats and actions and do that level of work. I think that's all I have on that for now. And then one more detailed update. I am working now with Camp Johnson, who hosts or has hosted a few pairs of grasshopper sparrows over the years, but they have not had the maintenance funds to maintain that habitat, and it's completely taken over with invasive plant species. The bed straw is just choking out everything, and then there's others as well. So it really needs a full reset, and there's really no good habitat there anymore. I'm a little worried about whether the birds will be able to do anything with it. We talked about it in VFWD, and I've been able to, as of yesterday, I've been able to work out a way for the manager there to get some bids and to be able to pay for at least brush hogging and clearing off the vegetation for this year hopefully before the birds get on territory, just to get that off. They didn't clear it last year, and so that really needs to go away. And then we'd look at starting to reset the field in the fall after the breeding season. And we do have mitigation funds from the Franklin County Airport. We have the funds from the T&E take permit, as well as there was $40,000 provided for this one strip of habitat that they want to turn into a taxiway in the future. And they didn't want to have to go through the whole process again. So they gave us match for that. Mitigation for that now. And so I think that will be a good way to use those funds, is to get Camp Johnson back in shape so that there'll at least be some habitat in the area for those birds. That's an update for Alan as much as anything, because I was going to follow up with him on that.
I appreciate that. As probably you saw, we have another takings permit for grasshopper sparrows coming up, and just continued challenges in terms of working with FAA and VTrans at Franklin County Airport. So this would be a nice step for a cooperative partner.
See, Matt has his hand up.
Yeah, go for it, Matt.
Yeah, thanks. Just two thoughts. One on the volunteer match hours. I wonder, would it be possible to like embed a link to that right in the agenda for each of our meetings? So, you know, right afterwards, we can just go log it in and we don't lose track of this and lose that opportunity. That might be a slick way to do it anyway.
That's a great idea, Matt. We could save 5 minutes at the end of the meeting for everyone to log their time as well. That could
Sure.
be part of the agenda. Yeah.
There we go. There we go. And then just a wild hair thought that occurred to me on the Camp Johnson grasshopper sparrow piece. Camp Johnson came up in our flag meeting the other day as a possible site for reintroduction of our native wild lupin. Into the future, Grace is exploring that as a possibility, and I know nothing about the grasshopper sparrow site. But if there might be a possible intersection of rare species habitat management there, lupin requires, you know, relatively frequent disturbance, not a lot of competition. That perhaps there's some opportunity for overlap there. I'm not sure. But.
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea. I know Grace and I have talked about that project that she's initiated and about the opportunity there. And I would think that they might be open to that. So now that there may be an opportunity to actually, you know, have a hand in some of the management decisions. The manager there is he's great to work with. And they do have it, you know, they have grasshopper sparrow actually in their management plan. So it's actually something they've committed to. And I know that Bob Pott in the past has worked with them in their forested areas for
the pitch pine.
Yep. And has had success with that. So there's a good track record there.
Yeah, for sure.
Thanks for that, Ken.
Yes.
As well.
Yeah, and bees as well. Yep. I think I think right now is just doing the immediate of getting, you know, those invasives under control. But then when it comes to the seeding, that'll be when I would need everyone's help.
Great. Questions for Oz? John? Anything else,
Commissioner?
Yeah, sorry, I forgot. I did want to provide an update in case people haven't heard. There have been some changes with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in our region in terms of retirements. Wendy Weber and Kyla Hassick, who are the regional and deputy regional, I'm blanking on the word.
Director.
Thank you. So they'll be leaving at the end of May, and Colleen Scully just announced that she'll be leaving on April 18th, and will be replaced by Jason Rassick. So that'll be a big change for us in the region. So.
It really will. That's a lot of institutional knowledge walking out the door at one time, and a lot of leadership. Interesting to see how that transitions. Just a couple other things that might be of interest to folks here. If you recall, last year around this time, we talked about some of the issues going on in the legislature that didn't necessarily relate to this committee's charge, but that relates to our larger conservation capacity and interests to move things forward. And one of those issues was the lawsuit that was brought against the department for the new trapping regulations that had been promulgated last year. We recently received the court's decision, and the court ruled in favor of the department in all instances. So there's a 30-day period within which the petitioners could appeal to the Vermont Supreme Court After 30 days, if they haven't appealed, then the rules will remain in effect. I only bring that up for this group because it's one of those things that affects our ability to do a lot of conservation work. And so if the attention is focused on another court case on something like the trapping rules, it means that that time, attention, and resources are not going to things like Camp Johnson or wild lupin restoration or take your pick. It just has an effect on the overall chemistry and capacity of the department. And no judgment on the outcome. You can feel as you need to about it. The other one that I wanted to mention, just so that you're aware, again, doesn't really relate to this group, although tangentially, I would argue that it does. We're working with the Fish and Wildlife Board right now to do fairly significant changes to the deer hunting regulations, with the objective being to get hunters to harvest more antlerless deer. Because we have worked for years now through our current rule system to try and make that happen unsuccessfully. So we've proposed a wide range of changes, including the option for people, hunters, to use their antlerless deer permits during the regular deer hunting rifle season, which the last time that was available to hunters was back in the 1980s, and it wasn't very popular. Even though a lot of hunters took advantage of it, it wasn't popular. Very different circumstances today, and we feel confident that this can be handled effectively and not decimate the deer population or create significant public safety concerns. If we were concerned about that, we wouldn't propose it. I bring it up because, if you're concerned about rare plants, for instance, or rare natural communities, this is as much about that as it is anything else. The health of the landscape, the health of our forests. So if you have questions about it, reach out. Happy to talk about it. If you feel inclined to be supportive of this within your communities in conversation, even better. Because the reason that we're doing it is for landscape health. Let's see. We've had one vacancy that we've been working to fill that does affect the interests of this committee. It is Noel Dodge's previous position, which is largely focused on habitat protection through Act 250, Section 248, wetland rules. And we have finally, the hiring committee has finally filled that position with the support of Commissioner Shortsleeve. I won't remember the individual's name in this moment. That's embarrassing. Her first name is Ellie. She's coming from the state of Washington. She's got great experience. Excited to have her join the team. She starts at the end of this month. So that will be helpful, restored capacity for resource protection, including rare, threatened, and endangered species. We're going through a public awareness building process right now. We had a first meeting last night, second meeting tomorrow night at the Middlebury High School about how the agency is going to comply with the new dam safety rules. Our department alone owns 66 dams around the state. The agency, I believe, owns just over 100 dams. So we got a lot of work to do. Some of these dams have issues with beavers and beaver dams on top of human-made dams. Two instances are Bristol Pond and Love's Marsh, which create very significant, diverse, rich wetland systems. And in order to comply with these dam safety rules, those beaver dams have got to go. And then we've got to have some kind of system set up that makes sure that the beaver dams don't return. So we're trying to engage with the public because, people rightly are concerned about the effects of these changes. We're a ways off from any implementation, and this is really all scoping and thinking about things in concept. But we want people to be aware, ask questions, offer ideas. First meeting last night went remarkably well. So anyway, just to be aware of, because it could affect this committee, because I mean, to the extent that there are listed species associated with any of these areas that would be affected by the change in water level, I imagine we'll be having a conversation about that. Yeah, Matt.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I mean, Bristol Pond in particular, I mean, that's a huge biodiversity hotspot in terms of rare species. The wetland complex associated with that is, yeah, dozens of rare species. I don't know the numbers right offhand, but certainly all potentially affected by that kind of water level change.
Yep. Thanks. Roz.
Yeah, just to respond to Matt, I've talked with Grace a bit about that. She didn't have a lot of concerns, but I imagine it'll be a discussion topic in Flora-Stag when the time comes. She was pretty hopeful as far as plants go anyway.
Okay, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was the first I'd heard it was a potential issue. So
Yeah.
Yeah. So stay tuned. Not psyched about this. We need this like we need a hole in the head. But I deal with it.
Is the issue the beavers impounding and overtopping the dam, or what? I'm trying to, okay.
So as I understand it, the issue is, there may be a host of issues, but the issue that I seem to understand is that the added height of the dam as a result of the beaver activity raises the water level to a point where it could exceed the capacity of the underlying dam to maintain the water. Yeah. So then you raise the risk of a, catastrophic release. Yeah. I mean, any of you who are familiar with Bristol Pond, that beaver dam has been in place for decades. I mean, I wouldn't have even guessed there was a man-made dam or human-made dam underneath it. Who'd have thunk?
Yeah.
Rich, couldn't your department have just looked at the beaver dam and thought, man, that's just a beaver dam. We don't have anything here.
Yeah, probably.
Dang it.
Would there be opportunities to work with engineers on kind of a case by case basis to see if it really is a threat at a particular site? If the increased water level, a foot or two or whatever it is a serious threat.
Well, that's what the dam safety engineers have been doing. So they're doing the assessments and making determinations of high, medium, or low in terms of level of risk.
So they've already decided that it's a high level of risk at Bristol Pond. Can I take you back to one of your previous topics? And that is antlerless deer. Where's the primary resistance coming from nowadays? And has that changed over the last 40 years?
Remarkably enough, there's been very little resistance.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I thought it would be just the opposite. And, once they hear Nick Fortin's presentation, people are for the most part understanding of why we're proposing what we're proposing and what the outcome is likely to look like. Mm-hmm.
When you comment on the last time antlerless deer harvest during rifle season was allowed, you said it wasn't popular. Does that mean it's not socially popular?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Because at the time in the 80s, if I recall correctly, the deer population went way down as a result of, in part, over harvest, as well as some rough winters. Last thing I had was, we talked a while ago about the landscape connectivity summit that was hosted back in June in Montreal. And our agency was part of that. Since then, the New England governors, maybe I've already brought this up. Have I already talked about this? If I have, I'll stop. I can't remember. In any event, the New England governors.
If you don't remember it and we don't remember it either, we're all fine.
It's brand new.
It doesn't matter.
I'm in good company. Doesn't get any easier. The New England Governors Eastern Canadian Premiers Association signed a resolution back in September reinstating a policy that they had in place in 2016 that required all of the New England states and the 5 Canadian provinces in the Maritime region in Quebec work together to come up with a plan for how we're going to maintain the connected landscape of the region. A lot of progress was made up until COVID, then it took a pause. So now we've got a restart to this, and there's a new working group being put together as we speak that will probably meet for the first time around the end of this month. It'll be connected or tied in with the Staying Connected initiative, which many of you are familiar with. So I just note it because it may be something that some of you have an interest in participating in as things start to operationalize. And I'm happy to keep folks posted and share information. Just don't hesitate to reach out.
Yeah, I see Jed has hopped on. I don't know if Jed, if you've been involved in that, but that would be great to keep him in the loop. It's what a lot of his research has been focused on.
Yep.
That's a great update. Thanks, John, for that. Yeah, I've been working with Jens and others on mapping connectivity for various species, and couldn't attend the conference last year, but sounds like a great initiative, and glad it's moving forward with some action.
Jed, if you're interested, it would be great to have you more directly engaged in some of the efforts of this working group and the intersection between that and the Staying Connected initiative. So happy to talk offline with you about that.
That would be great. Thanks, John. Yeah. Are you on that working group, or is there a point person in the department on that?
I'm the point person for the agency.
Even better. Wonderful. Okay. Yeah. Happy to chat offline about that. Much appreciated. Thanks, John.
Sounds good.
Any other questions for Roz and John? Andrea? Okay.
One last thing.
Yeah.
Sorry, real quick.
Yeah.
Just a thank you to Abigail for providing the refreshments this morning. So dig in, for taking the notes. Thank you, Abigail.
You're welcome.
Well, until, I'm not sure really what to do next without, well, hold on. You, me, Matt, we still don't have. Yeah.
Need one more, right?
Yeah. Motion to adjourn. All right, we have, I guess maybe what would probably make sense is, we've got three, well, we've got requests from 3 SAGs for new members, which, I think are pretty, non-controversial. Why don't we just talk about those? I'll have Jed, Kent, and Mark maybe give a quick overview of them. I think that will be something we can easily just handle in an electronic vote offline. So maybe I'll pass it to you, Jed, because I know your time is tight, and mention your nomination for the Mammal SAG.
Yes, thank you, Alan. And I can be pretty quick here, and we're not in an immediate rush, so if you have to vote at another time, that's okay. But the Mammal SAG would like to advance the nomination of Dr. Elise Lauterbur, who is a new assistant professor in the biology department at UVM. She started last year. Great credentials around mammals. Had a postdoc in ecology and evolutionary biology at University of Arizona. PhD in ecology and evolution from Stony Brook, and a BA in biology from Oberlin. So kind of a deep academic history in biology, ecology, and evolution. But she's got expertise in mammals, particularly small mammals, which we have a need for on the Mammal SAG. So she's done quite a bit of work on bats, including Myotis, which we have in Vermont, rodents, some small mammals, and primates too, lemurs, as another part of her background. But again, she brings some expertise that I think we need on the group. She has a vibrant lab group that really focuses on evolution and ecology, really focusing on how organisms live and evolve in the context of natural ecosystems. She has 15 peer-reviewed papers and really high-impact journals like Proceedings of the Royal Society, Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, Current Biology, Scientific Advances. So she has some real excellent credentials, I think, in terms of scholarship. So the Mammal SAG reviewed her application, nomination rather, and voted unanimously in favor of her joining the group. And I'd ask for your support on that so that we can start rebuilding some of our ranks around small mammals. So thank you.
Thanks for that, Jed. Any questions or discussion from the ESC? No, sounds like a shoe-in.
Sounds like a
When
great
we have-
addition.
when we
I think
have
she's
four.
great. She
Yeah.
also has quite a bit of experience in disease ecology, just as a sidebar. So if there's an increasing interest in disease issues, especially with bats, I think she could be a great resource on other initiatives to the department. So quick note.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jed. Did you want to add anything, Stephanie?
No, I just wanted to make sure that you knew I was actually present. That's all.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. I guess. I mean, we still. I mean, I think if we counted you and John, we would probably get to I mean, normally we think of 6 as our voting membership because you all mostly recuse yourselves. But if we had 5 of 9, we could vote if you and John want to vote on new members to the SAG.
Happy to do that.
Yes, indeed.
Oh, all
Me as
right.
well. I will vote
Good.
on new members of the SAG.
Making progress.
Look at that. A quorum emerges.
Problem solving, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Well, those in favor of adding Dr. Elise Lauterbur to the Mammal SAG, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, awesome. Thank you for that, Jed. Appreciate it.
Terrific. Thank you all.
All right, Kent, take it away.
Thank you, Alan. Yes, we have a new member for the invertebrate SAG that we'd like to add, Connor Quinn, longtime member, recently retired from DEC, Steve Fisk, recommended Connor and brought him on board to possibly be on our group, where Steve used to work and still actually does work part-time in the biomonitoring division of DEC, and that's where Connor is, and he's a specialist in stream macroinvertebrates and does a lot of the macroinvertebrate work for the biomonitoring crew at DEC. And we recently lost Michelle Graziosi, who was at the DEC doing macroinvertebrate work, so this is a replacement for Michelle, so that we have another macroinvertebrate stream ecologist expert on the group. We've added a lot of, because of Steve and Michelle in the past, helping Mark Ferguson, we've been able to look a lot stronger at macroinvertebrates and understand which one should be species of greatest conservation need. And so having that continue to be able to sort of look at these macroinvertebrates more closely, we really need someone like Connor Quinn. So I encourage you to vote for him to be on the ISAG.
Thanks, Ken. Any questions or comments for Ken? All right. All those in favor of adding Connor Quinn to the invertebrate SAG signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Passes unanimously. Thanks so much, Ken.
Thank you, quorum.
Okay, Mark. new member request for the bird SAG.
Yes, so we have a request to add Kevin Tolan to our bird SAG. Kevin is currently a student up at UVM. His background is in large part with grassland birds, with a focus right now on eastern meadowlark. I don't know, Kent, you can maybe a previous or current employee for the Vermont Center for Eco Studies.
Current.
He's still an
Current, yeah.
employee. He's still a part-time employee. Yes.
Okay. And has been instrumental in developing the management recovery plan for eastern meadowlark, and has been attending a number of different SAG meetings over the course because of that over the past couple of years. Has a background, again, his master's is focused on eastern meadowlark, and we just feel he would be a great addition to our bird SAG.
Any questions or comments for Mark? All right. All those in favor of adding Kevin Tolan to the bird SAG, signify by saying aye. Aye. Nice.
Thank you.
Unanimous. All right. So, quorum, can I ask you one more time? How about a vote on the minutes from the last meeting?
I wasn't at the last meeting, so I cannot vote, or I have to step out on that one.
Okay. All right.
So close.
Well, I will just also, we may be able to get to it eventually. I will just also thank Abby for doing the minutes. That was great. And I know Roz tremendously appreciates it as well. So she's been able to participate without having to do double duty on note taking. And thanks so much for that.
Welcome.
Yeah.
I second that.
Okay, so next on the agenda is a call for nominations for the Sally Laughlin Award. I think a lot of times we've ended up having this conversation at our September meeting and been in a mad rush to actually see if the potential winner could actually make Dead Creek Days in like 2 to 3 weeks. So it's a little bit been touch and go. And so just wanted to have a conversation in terms of thinking about nominations for the award now, so we could start deliberating or maybe even come to consensus and move forward and try to make sure we can actually get the award winner to a place where we can actually present and recognize them. So go ahead, Roz.
Just a quick question, whether, so these are all recorded now, these meetings?
Mhm.
So if we want, I think we had this discussion last year. I don't know what we decided to do, but we could
Executive
save it
session.
for executive session.
I guess I'm gonna say let's not worry about it right now. Yeah.
So are you looking for people's names? Or are you looking for people who are willing to do the paperwork and get the nomination together?
I'm looking for names right now. Yeah.
Because I would certainly suggest Liz Thompson as a possibility. If there's somebody who feels familiar enough with her work, perhaps another botanist or community ecologist, to put together, I mean, there's a fair amount of time involved in putting the nomination together.
Yep.
If you really wanted to reflect their history and everything that they have
Yeah.
offered to the conservation community over the last, 40 years, 50 years?
Yeah. No, I think Liz came up in our last conversation, and she would be awesome. So definitely would like to have her name there. Jed, see your hand up.
Yes, if you're taking nominations, I'd put forward Kim Royer, who has had an exceptional career serving the state, but primarily mammals, who retired, 2 years ago. But I think would be well deserving of the award. So
thank you for that.
I'll just throw in there that looking at the past award winners, I'm glad that these first two recommendations are of the
Other gender.
women. Because if you do look at the past
Mhm.
list, it is rather lopsided in that.
It's actually 100% lopsided because we named it for Sally, but Sally was not, Kent was actually the first award winner. So it was named in honor of Sally.
Right.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
Sally did not actually win.
I'm embarrassingly trying to look up on the internet the list of previous winners, and Jim just handed it to me. Thanks, Jim.
You're welcome.
Yeah, we didn't, I mean, I think technically, I mean, it looks like we skipped a year in there,
Yeah.
I think, but I don't think we did. I think it was because, well, maybe we actually did, but I think we had the New England, Natural History meeting was in Burlington, and so we awarded it to Ian kind of late. So it, anyway, yeah. Which maybe then put us behind a year.
Those are two outstanding candidates right there.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Mhm. Any other names anyone wants to put forward?
More on my list, but I'm really rooting for the one I already mentioned, so I'll save the other two for later.
Yeah. I guess
Alan, could you comment a bit on process here? So let's say these two were advanced on for consideration. What sort of paperwork, as Jim mentioned, might be required here to actually formalize the nomination?
Yeah, I can just send something out to the group, but essentially, yes, we've had ask for, more or less a one pager nomination and their contributions to conservation of endangered and threatened species. And probably again, because our next meeting isn't until September, we would probably have to have some online conversation or an online vote about that. But the thing that we had tried to do in the past, and I think one of the things that I probably haven't done all that well in this group is we used to have more defined subcommittees. And so I think we had an education and outreach subcommittee that was the one that was kind of in charge of the looking at nominations and bringing forward a recommendation to the whole ESC. But I think we could just go ahead and do that as a group would be fine. So yeah, if you are, I mean, I can, well, I was going to say maybe I wouldn't burden you, Jim, on Liz's nomination. I know you've done your fair share in the past. So, but Jed, if you want to work with somebody from the state on nomination letter for Kim, that would be great. I can work on nomination letter for Liz as well, and send them into the and because it would be nice to have this decided prior to our September meeting when we're just a couple weeks away from the Dead Creek Day, if we want to go that route again, which has been worked out really well.
Okay, sounds great. Thanks.
Yep.
And it's always useful to have some time to get the word out and to get people at Dead Creek, to get the key people at Dead Creek, so that the recipient really feels like those people that mean the most to them are there and
Yeah.
supportive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Alan, if you need help with that, I'm sure Eric Sorensen,
Yeah.
retired
Mhm.
college, is
Yeah.
very happy to help. 'Cause
For
he
sure.
works so
Yeah.
closely with us.
Right. All right, excellent. Thanks so much. Well, I actually have a break scheduled. Look at that, and we're a couple minutes ahead.
Nice.
Unbelievable. And we may just get quicker and quicker as we go through more items that we can't vote on. So anyway, why don't we take a couple minutes and Mark, when we come back, talk about the Meadowlark recovery plan.
I have no idea what sugar is.
Yeah.
On recovery plan for Eastern Meadowlark.
So Kevin Tolan and Jason Hill, both from VCE, have been working with the state in order to develop a Eastern Meadowlark management and recovery plan. In line with the Eastern Meadowlark's listing as threatened in, I guess it was 2021. So Kevin has been working diligently and Jason have been working diligently on this one. And this is kind of an interesting, as we, many of the species, especially bird species that we've worked with, have been species that common loon, common tern, peregrine falcon, bald eagle, they tend to be charismatic species, and their nesting locations tend to be, how to put it? I guess I'm saying Eastern Meadowlark is kind of a new approach to how we look at management, because the recovery plan is not necessarily to recover the species to numbers that existed 100 years ago. Which some of the other plans that I just mentioned do try to do that. It's more of a plan to continue to stop the decline of what remaining birds that we have here in Vermont, and find a steady level for the species to be continue to be a part of the state's AVA fund. And so we worked to look at that and come up with that. And you'll see that when you go down, there's this plan goes through a lot of the various different life histories. And fortunately, the Vermont atlases provided a lot of data to document the decline of this species over the course of the past couple of decades. That has been declining regionally as well. So there was a lot of information that was available there when we made the initial recommendation to include it on as a threatened species, including the use, a new use of using eBird data as one of the supporting data points for making this species threatened. And this plan includes a number of different, not only the life history, but threats, as well as the objectives for what we would see or hope to see in order to delist or uplist the species here in Vermont. And so we're basically working with numbers of, that, again, we're not looking to fully return Eastern Meadowlark to historic levels that may have occurred here in Vermont, 100 years ago. We're kind of settling on a number that sustains this species within the state. And to that extent, the first, is we've stuck with our 5-year average. So the first objective is to have at least 200 individuals of Eastern Meadowlarks in suitable Vermont breeding habitat. And the second objective is a 5-year population decline of less than 0%. So basically what we're saying is 200 birds in the species isn't declining. And this would allow consideration for delisting of Eastern Meadowlark from threatened and have it be removed from the endangered species list. In the opposite direction is a number that we use on the bird SAG for a lot of species for uplifting, which is 100 individuals. And so if the species drops below the 100 individuals, eastern meadowlarks here in the state, then there would be consideration for that species to move to endangered status. Of course, many of the actions for recommendation and, for recovery is understanding these numbers on a consistent basis. So we know where the population of eastern meadowlark stands here in the state. And then also determining focus areas where concentrated management can be enacted. I think part of, and then further on, stepping down from that, developing management plans for each of these different focal areas that may address variables that might not be shared by the focus areas themselves in order to get the work to be done. And that is basically the gist of the document as far as some of the goals that we would use in order to, either download, which is hopefully the direction we want to go, or downlist or uplist the species. There are a lot of challenges because this is a species that obviously uses grasslands, and so you have the agricultural component that plays out in this situation. It's not like a common tern on an island that you can put buoys out around and protect through management of not only the birds and their nesting habitats, but also the island itself. And so, I think a lot of this effort really looks to, and we've done this in a couple of other fashions too, looks to really identify where the birds are, where the focal areas are, and then come up with management plans to sustain the species here in the state. Al, any comments you might want to throw in there?
Maybe I'll just ask a question because I can't remember the answer to this. So, as maybe some people remember, we don't have recovery plans for the other species of grassland birds that are listed in the state, and we have quite a few: grasshopper sparrow, upland sandpiper, sedge wren, and then loggerhead shrike and Henslow sparrows, which are essentially extirpated. But we do have this grassland bird management plan, which does have essentially sort of recovery goals, which were approved by the ESC as well. I'm wondering if you're thinking this will essentially slot into that grassland bird management plan to kind of update the meadowlark component to it?
Yeah, so when the grassland bird management recovery plan came into being or first started, it was Steve Perrin basically saying, how can we look at a suite of species and approach that suite of species as opposed to necessarily developing plans within that. So the grassland bird management plan covered a lot of historical topics and things. And then at the end, we decided that the endangered and threatened species would be broken down into their own or have their own recommendations and thoughts on that, but they were not extensive pieces. I wrote it, I should know, but I wrote it also. I think I started writing it in 2007, 2008, and then it sat on someone's desk for many years before it kind of came back in. So I do believe this takes that component that focuses on eastern meadowlark in the grassland bird management plan and takes it to the next level. Mm-hmm. And the desire that I think Steve had with that was just this, that we would look at the species as a suite, but we would separate them out as individual units. So if there was more for focus or work on them, we could build upon that.
Mhm.
So I would see this, yes, as basically building on or substituting for what was in that recovery document.
Mhm. Great. Matt?
Yeah, I guess maybe sort of building on your process question, I'll maybe reveal my own ignorance around this, but I'm just sort of wondering, stepping back from this plan, which I think is fantastic to have this kind of a recovery plan in place. We have nothing like this for plants, for example. How does this tie into statutory requirements around, I mean, was this somehow required in the listing? We don't have this sort of a recovery plan for, I think, the majority of our listed species. So I'm trying to wrap my head a little bit more around that. Or is it just like, I mean, it's great to have this to guide work and guide, up or down listing and that sort of thing. But can someone provide clarity around that for me?
Gonna say we need Hannah here. Let me see if
Yeah, as far as the scientific bird SAG, we have created recovery plans for a number of species, common tern, peregrine falcon, bald eagle. And again, it was a process that was done, in the case of bald eagle, on a regional level, and then kind of dropped down to the state of Vermont. And we've approached those, as we have the opportunity to. But I don't know if I don't think there's an official mandate that says that species have to have a recovery plan.
So I'm looking at the statute right now. There's a couple places I think where this shows up. So under section 5403C, the secretary may, with advice of the Endangered Species Committee, and after the consultation required under subsection 5408E of this section, adopt rules for the protection, conservation, or recovery of endangered and threatened species. So it's a may in that case.
So Matt, we've periodically reviewed in the herp SAG, periodically reviewed the herps and kind of prioritized the species and what would be the one that if we were to write another recovery plan, what would it be? And we've done that a few times. We have recovery plans, rattlesnake, but we don't have very many. We have a few recovery plans out there.
Yeah, it's great to have this sort of focused attention and guidance rather than just plain and simple a listing designation. It's just not something we've been able to get to for plants at all. So just thinking about the process and where this comes into play.
Yeah, and I think, as far as bird SAG, it's often, we were really fortunate to have VCE and Kevin particularly focused on this particular species. And so, writing the plan obviously takes time, staff time. And so I don't want to say it's opportunistic, but, we can say, we'd love to have a recovery plan for eastern meadowlark, but then it's up to somebody to actually do that plan. And if that some person is affiliated with an organization, the okay from that organization to use potential time if that's how they're going to do it. And so we've kind of approached it as opportunities have presented themselves. Some of the charismatic megafauna like peregrine falcons, loons, bald eagles, the bald eagle plan in large part was done by the state, for instance. John Buck was the point person for putting together that particular plan. Common tern plan, when I was working at VINS, that was the state funding some of those recovery efforts to put that plan together. So, we've always approached it, I guess, in the bird sag, that if we have the opportunity to do it and we can, we do.
Mhm.
I'm curious about your mention of use of the eBird data, and I wonder, because I think about this in projects I work on,
Yeah.
use of iNaturalist
Mhm.
data. And do you think that you would have come up with different population numbers in that sort of sweet spot between 100 and 200, excluding eBird data or including it?
We used the eBird, and it was kind of, the first time we've ever done that. Al kind of was the point for that. We use that primarily for the listing. And then, a lot of the numbers that have followed from that has come out of Kevin and VCE's work with Eastern Meadowlark that have kind of been able to fine tune those actual numbers that we're seeing.
Gotcha.
But eBird allowed us to, maybe not an exact sense of how many Eastern Meadowlarks were out there, but that combined with what we were seeing in the Atlas, the Vermont Bird Atlas, we were able to use those two as components for listing.
Yeah,
you might be able to speak to that more.
Well, I mean, I was just going to say, I mean, there's actually a pretty nice paper. I mean, I have my questions about eBird as well, as it becomes the, sort of the Pokemon Go game of the birding community. There was a paper came out from Cornell, who spearheaded the program, and essentially said that they, for common species, they had really good correlations between the giant North American breeding bird survey population trend estimates and eBird population trend estimates. But you had to get up to somewhere in the order of 10,000 records for that to actually work. And it had to be, and to get to 10,000, it's not going to happen in Vermont. You've got to have it over a broad spatial scale. So it can work, but it's probably never going to be perfect like in the state of Vermont. What Kevin has done has really focused on the Vermont birding community to share all of their meadowlark sightings with an entity, sort of a fake name at VCE, where they actually are pulling in all of the meadowlark data and being able to summarize it there. And Kevin has actually been trying to go back to some of these sites where someone reported it in 2022. We didn't find it in 2023. Was that just because no birders went there, or were they actually gone? So he's actually documented, still small populations blinking out here and there.
So using it kind of as a tool to inform the follow-up.
Right.
So you see a meadowlark, they're using eBird through the project mode. You can send data specific to a project as a vehicle for getting those sightings into Kevin. But originally it was more Al sitting down with the eBird data and kind of bird by bird almost going through to make sure that, okay, this bird was seen here on the 25th, and on the 26th, there was another sighting of a bird really close to there, and likelihood that it's the same bird, that kind of stuff. So that was a little bit more. Did you have a student working on that?
Yeah. It was tedious for sure, but I think it gave us some ballpark numbers, so which was helpful.
But this now, Kevin and VCE, especially with all their bird, what is it? The Project of Life.
Atlas of Life.
Kevin has used the community out there that's birding through the eBird portal to identify areas where the birds are, but then has done a lot of follow-up as well for verification purposes and things of that nature.
Can I ask a question about your 200 number? Like, I understand that's based on sort of historic populations. But this is a question that's come up sometimes in our HERP work where, at least when I was in grad school, which was a while ago now, we learned about sort of the 5,500 rule, and maybe some of you academics have a little more knowledge about that currently. But my concern is always when I hear something sort of under the 500 number, like, are we looking at genetic bottlenecks or concerns with smaller population sizes? And if so, like, how do we take that into account? Like, is 200 a good number, or should we really be looking at 500 or 1,000?
I think that I don't know the answer to that question.
Come on, it's an easy answer, Mark.
Oh. Yeah, I know. I mean, I had never heard of the 500 thing, so I go further back than you. I think it falls into that category of we're dealing with a species that has declined again, that we're never going to get back to. Go back 300 years, how many meadowlarks were there? Go back 150 years when most of the state was in farmland, we had a lot of meadowlarks. So what is that historic number? So I don't say that Kevin necessarily settled on 200, but it was an attempt to say, we have these birds, this is the number of birds that we have now, pairs, we can make some, if we can stay in that range and keep the birds in place here in Vermont, that's ultimately the goal we're looking to achieve.
I'll say, a couple things. One that I guess you didn't maybe bring up earlier, Mark, and one of the challenges with meadowlark is they are probably the most area sensitive species of all our grassland birds. So, to some degree, you could think of them a little bit as an umbrella species. They are probably, always going to be in places that maybe are protecting grasshopper sparrows, but maybe they will be. But I think that the 5,500, essentially short-term, long-term population viability may not come into play quite so much with eastern meadowlarks, which are a migratory species. Right. So we probably have a bigger regional meadow population. But I don't know, Matt, if you want to say anything, or Carla want to say anything about plants, because we've got a lot of plants in the state that have really small populations and are probably not actually interacting with other populations outside of the state. We have something on Mount Mansfield where there's one individual, one I can't remember what tree or shrub that is, but with birds you're constantly having natural genetic influx or outflux as birds disperse and new birds enter the population. We've documented that with common terns by just banding data of birds that connect us with the St. Lawrence and Lake Oneida. Our birds are going there, their birds are coming here. So I think as Al pointed out, it's because birds can fly. It's a kind of a different thing. Even herps, are much more isolated in their populations just because their, movement strategies aren't as extended, expansive. And I don't even know with the recovery plans, how have we done this in the past? Does the endangered species, not vote and then accept the recovery plan? I think that's how we've. Yeah, and I do believe that they, essentially become formal Fish and Wildlife Department documents. When they're approved here, I'm assuming they still go through the secretary. They essentially are up on your website. And
that's what the statute has, is the secretary can approve the recovery plans with the advice from the Endangered Species Committee.
5403, Section C. Matt, were you going to say something?
Well, yeah, I guess just to respond to your comment, certainly many of our rare plant species don't reach anything close to a 5,500 individual threshold, and plants, of course, by their nature are sedentary and very different apart from in, you know, certain life phases, pollen moving around and so forth. And we're still, you know, really, I mean, it takes genetic research really most often to really try to kind of unravel just how isolated our different populations are and what really constitutes, you know, barriers to gene flow and that sort of thing. So I'm certainly not up on the latest research and that field generally. But I don't know if Carla, if you have any other thoughts about population numbers and how that comes into play.
No, nothing really else to add. The genetic stuff is above my pay grade in many respects.
Yeah.
But, you know, to your point, Matt, like for the small and smallest populations that we monitor here in Vermont, there's a, you know, an analog or, you know, for these high elevation kind of alpine islands that happen. There's similar monitoring work going on in Maine and New Hampshire and other northeastern states. And so, you know, birds can fly and these plants are scattered, obviously beyond the state boundaries of Vermont as well. So just kind of taking that larger scope view on the population genetics is important.
And I think you can jump in after this, Roz. I mean, I think in terms of conservation biology, there were a lot of people who had that same question about the 5,500 rule and, you know, essentially said, oh, my population's below 50. I just go away and watch them go extinct now. And so that essentially led to the, you know, kind of analytical or, you know, kind of subfield of population viability analysis, where you actually have some understanding of birth rates and survival rates, what the variation is around those. So you could actually model populations into the future, and then you could set up different scenarios. So like, what if, you know, we lost this patch of habitat? What if we lost this corridor? Can we model that to say, you know, what's actually going to have the greatest impact, positive or negative, on a population into the future? Go ahead, Roz.
Yeah, just going back to eastern meadowlark and grassland birds in general, what Mark was saying about how far back do you go? What are you trying to create? I think I keep finding that, you know, with grassland birds, we're in this unique space that I think people are grappling with all the time, which is that they're associated with agricultural habitats that are sort of their surrogate grasslands. I think people question whether they were here historically, but there is evidence to suggest that they were, albeit in, you know, low numbers compared to when all the land was cleared, obviously. And then another aspect is how to restore riparian zones that are in areas that have been in agriculture. And a lot of people working on that are really they're used to doing that within forested landscapes, and applying the idea of having tree riparian areas with trees is really what water quality folks and fish folks are really interested in seeing happen within these agricultural areas. And of course, that can reduce the openness for the grassland birds. So then you have this riparian zone management objectives, sometimes conflicting with objectives for a listed species now. So that's been a dance we're trying to do. And ideally, we would find areas to manage for these birds that are uplands and just don't even enter that conflict. But in the Champlain Valley, you have a lot of these valleys, these bottomlands with rivers that once flowed and you know, are ditched and tiled, and in the effort of restoring them, you want to do the best you can, and then at the same time, the grassland birds need the open space. So that's just another whole challenge that we're actually going to do a site visit at this Gorton property where we're trying to manage for birds, but there's also riparian area concerns. So it feels like an uphill battle sometimes in terms of finding a way to navigate the interests of grassland birds amidst, other concerns, and in a state that sort of historically, is mostly focused on the health of forest ecosystems. Yeah.
Shrubs, Roz, the compromise, shrubs.
Shrubs can be, I agree. They can be, but I would say that shrubs aren't good enough for some folks for riparian management. So
we're working on that. We're working on that. We're actually working with a number of the river, the watershed groups that are looking at some of these and looking at their just seeing their planting plans. And it is quite strongly skewed in some instances towards shrub species, as opposed to, just putting a line of trees on either side of the drainage, and returning it into not even a forest at that point. It actually potentially offers more opportunity if it stays in some kind of shrub habitat that protects water quality and erosion. It may offer more opportunities for species than, say, just having 2 lines of trees down the side of a stream.
We're trying to encourage.
That could be a good compromise as long as it doesn't create travel corridors for predators.
Right.
Oh, come on, Roz.
So the grassland bird management plan does address some of these, and so that's why I don't think you see necessarily a justification in this document for why grassland birds should be present and protected here in Vermont. The plan addresses that component of it, and provides justification for this. So that's why you don't necessarily find it here in this plan.
I've heard some discussion that beaver meadows could have been pretty extensive, at least in the lowlands 300 years ago, et cetera. Could they ever have been large enough? I don't really know what the minimum area is that we're talking about for meadowlarks, but
it's been one justification for historic presence of grassland birds in the Northeast.
Yeah.
But, right now, bird conservation region, as far as the North American Bird Conservation Initiative, which extends up through includes the Champlain Valley and the St. Lawrence Plains, currently supports about, or it did, I don't know what the latest numbers are, but, somewhere between 10 and 15% of the bobolink population in North America. And it has, to some extreme, become a refugia for species that Midwestern habitats aren't necessarily available to them anymore because of agriculture. So.
I guess a couple of things. One, I don't really want to get into it now, but maybe Abby, if you can put this down as like an action item for our next meeting. I think it would be, we've had this conversation about recovery plans and the fact that this one has come about pretty quickly and it's not tremendously long, but still, took 2 years for the VFWD to kind of get through it and move it forward. Ken's talking about a mussel recovery plan that has been in the works for a long time. So some of the things that have come up, one, recovery plans that address natural communities, and we bring together a suite of species, and maybe we're not actually looking at specific numbers for the species, but maybe conserving particular acreage of different types of natural communities. I guess that was both things put together. Natural communities, suite of species. Oh yeah, and something that's shorter, something that's not a 50-page document,
right?
That we can actually work on and maybe put these together moderately quickly. So I think it would be great to have that conversation at the next meeting, talk about it in a little more detail.
You could certainly throw in a few snake species, a few herb species with the grassland birds. I mean, across different taxonomic groups, and there would be plants,
Yep.
insects.
Mhm.
And we're even seeing that in some of the permit applications that we're looking at.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You know, which
Right.
is
Yep.
covering different taxa,
Yeah.
you know, in that. So I think that was Steve's goal was, you know, these recovery plans, the early iterations of the recovery plans were fairly sizable documents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And took a lot of energy and so on and so forth to put that in. And Steve's idea was, let's pull them together and let's keep them separate components within that larger document. So something like this could actually happen, where if a species is, you know, actually, I'm trying to think now. In the recovery plan, Eastern meadowlark is it's not one of the ENT species covered, but now that it's become threatened, it's just able to use that as a launching board to have a document that's much smaller, much more focused, and doesn't take as much time.
The other thing, I guess I might maybe move, well, I don't know, I guess John and Stephanie, question as to whether or not you're comfortable voting on the Eastern Meadowlark Recovery Plan. I was gonna maybe ask for a friendly amendment, and in the executive summary, you actually have 200 individuals and 100 individuals, but when you get into the actual goals, I think you switch over to pairs. And I was going to say, if you could just make those consistent, so we're whichever makes the most sense, individuals or pairs, but we're using the same numbers both in the executive summary and in the actual part recovery goal part. That would be good.
Okay.
Yeah. And since I should have been reviewing this, you know, through the VFWD, I apologize for bringing it up now.
So what would be next steps then?
Well, my next step is asking Stephanie and John if they would feel comfortable voting on the Eastern Meadowlark Recovery Plan.
Well, I have to, full disclosure, I've not read it.
Oh, okay.
I certainly would yield to the experts in the room here. So, you know, if others are comfortable with it, I have high confidence. So.
Well, Stephanie, how about you? Would you consider voting at all, or is this something you just rather not do? And I guess it.
Yeah, I will likely recuse myself
Okay.
on
Yeah,
this,
yeah.
unfortunately. Only
Well,
because it's not,
yeah.
again, I'm not an expert.
Yeah.
And yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Well, it's agriculture too, so I mean that makes
You know, well, I'll
No, I'm trying to give you an out.
But it could be
yeah.
them.
I'm gonna recuse. I'm gonna stay there.
Yeah. Okay. So next step, it will be an e-vote from the V.S.A, and then we'll go from there. So, yeah.
Okay.
So I think you could make those minor changes, and I'll send it around. So, and there may be a whole suite of e-votes coming up. So,
okay.
Yeah.
So what's the intent? 200 pairs or 200 individuals?
Individuals. Yeah. Because ultimately, you know, walk up on a turn island, look at a peregrine cliff. It's easy to count those numbers. And this falls into that category, which we're start looking at with some of these species. I think it's something that other SAGs have dealt with over time. We've been fortunate as a bird SAG that most of the ones that have gone up have, you know, we got to protect this cliff. Or we, you know, so yeah, just tough to get some of those other numbers. So.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you for that, Mark. Thanks to the Bird SAG for your work on this.
And thank you to Kevin and Jason.
Yeah.
And VCE for providing their time, I assume, for to get the work accomplished.
All right, I will move this over to you, Kent, for proposal for listing of the elk toe mussel.
All right. Thank you, Alan. Unfortunately, 3 of our mussel experts could not make it today. And they are Michael Lou Smith, Mark Ferguson from the department, and Steve Fisk, who I mentioned earlier, are sort of our 3 mussel experts on our committee. But I was the actual author of the report, and with them contributing all of their expertise. So hopefully if there's any questions, I can answer them. But if not, we might have to go back to them a little bit. But we've been working on elk toe for a number of years. It was first discovered by Mark Ferguson on a stretch of, on just a 6-mile stretch of river, Lamoille River. And 2000, I think he found it by accident. And the following year, there was a contractor for the state who did extensive elk toe surveys throughout the stretch of river and beyond. And since then, Mark says that they've surveyed all the river drainages around there and up and down beyond both dams and never found any other elk toe populations. So it only exists in that 6-mile stretch of river. And then Michael Lou Smith on a contract went back in 2019, almost 20 years later, and resurveyed the elk toe population and found some evidence for a decline of the elk toe there. And this freshwater mussel has shown evidence in a lot of its range of having declines. And so we aren't alone in that. And so it's on the periphery of the range. We're on the very edge of the range in the, what would it be? It would be the northeast part of the range. And it's only one population. That's the only exists. And there is, like I said, there is some evidence of decline over the 20 years. Not perfect evidence, but some evidence of decline. I don't know, assuming that people have looked at this report already, I could answer questions or I could go deeper into this a little bit more. I'm not sure what your pleasure is, Alan or others.
Well, I'll just ask a few questions here, and it is a proposal for endangered. The one I guess I'm kind of wondering about is obviously, small isolated population. Is there anything about its life history that makes it more susceptible to, if you've got here sedimentation, nutrient, chemical pollution, et cetera, more susceptible to those than other mussels? Or is it just the fact that it kind of started rare and is now declining?
I think it's both of those. It definitely started rare and is declining, especially in this population. But apparently also it is actually, and all the experts across the range exclaim this, that when they're surveying it, it's a hit or miss species. It's not like you find big beds of it like you do with other mussels. So you don't get into a mussel bed and find like hundreds of these things. It's really kind of not like that kind of mussel. It's just sort of scattered. And it has apparently it's very sensitive to being stepped on or other kinds of environmental perturbation because it's got a very thin shell. And so they even talk about, and our guys here in the state have talked about this, about not monitoring it every year because they're afraid that actually even monitoring it will harm it because it's got a delicate shell and very sensitive to be stepped on. So yeah, it's not like some of the other mussels where you find these big beds of it and like, oh, this riffle's got, hundreds of them right here. It's not like that at all. It's just really sort of scattered.
And do you know much? I mean, do you know what the host fish is? And is that something a concern? Is that a species that might be? I
think it's pretty well known what the host fish is probably for our stretch of river here. And I'm actually forgetting what it is. It's something that's very common actually. What is it? I think it's a
Wasn't it-
sucker, maybe.
Yeah, wasn't it the white sucker?
It is, yeah. The only concern is that it's trapped by two different dams. So it's stopped. Like this population has got no connectivity with other populations or it's spread because it's surrounded by two dams, one above it and one below it.
Ken, just out of curiosity, there was some information provided about, like, I guess you'd say challenges in detectability for this particular mussel species based on some other studies that had been done. Do you know why that is? Like, does it burrow into the substrate more deeply than other species, or is it smaller, or like, why would this one particularly be so hard to see?
It burrows deeper than the other species, and it's not, and coupled with not being found in big groups. So I think it's probably really easy for an observer to pass by one and not see it. So as I wrote in there, I went, some might say overboard on detectability, but I think it's really important when we're talking about potential declines to understand that detectability is really low of this species, because that causes us to maybe either miss declines or falsely declare declines. And so the detectability of this species for quick surveys is pretty low. Yeah, you threw up the table. Thank you. So that's for one point. This is from a study for many rivers for a couple of species, including Alto in Ontario, Canada. And they did a really nice job looking at detectability there. And you can see detectability is pretty low if it's 1.5 hour searches, and goes and doubles quickly as you double your time. So if you haven't searched it long enough, you're going to have pretty low detectability. And so I tried to adjust some of the numbers, I believe, in the report, which you'd think I'd have it in front of me, but I don't. I tried to adjust some of the numbers that our folks have found using the detectability numbers from Ontario, just to get an idea.
Has anyone done eDNA work? It seems like it would be a good candidate given the detection problems.
It probably would be for presence only detections. Yeah, for other, like to look at other watersheds, that would be a great strategy to see if we have any other populations. And I think Mark and others have talked about that. I asked Mark recently, Ferguson, if he felt like there were other populations, and Steve Fisk, and they're like, they feel like they've really looked at other streams and done so many surveys that even though there's low detectability, they don't think they're missing a population. But of course, then I bring up like, well, we didn't find this one until 2000. So it is possible.
Is there thinking that there's something unique in terms of the habitat about that particular stretch that makes it more appropriate for that species?
I think it's just that stretch might be where it's just okay habitat, because the dams aren't affecting that stretch. They probably didn't get up the fall line through the dam above them. That would have been a waterfall there. So they might not even have passed that before. And it's been searched up above there and they've never found it above there. And then below, we don't know, because there's a big lake there now. So they definitely, if they were there, they would have been extirpated from there. So I think it's just that it's literally not affected by a dam.
Yeah.
Are they in the Richelieu? I was trying to guess from the big range map you had. Just wondering how they got to the Lamoille in the first place.
Good question. They probably always been there and we didn't know it. I'm guessing. Not always, but I mean, you know, since the glacier period.
Yeah, just curious if they could have
the gills of suckers.
Right. Did a sucker travel from the Richelieu up to the Lamoille and seed the river or something?
I'm sure that's how it happened. They went on fish. I mean, that's how it usually happens. And now they're isolated now. There's no way they have connectivity to other populations because of the two dams. Well, I shouldn't say there's no way. I guess a sucker could somehow get through the dam, but unlikely.
They don't jump like salmon. I'm trying to envision suckers launching.
Flying suckers.
Yeah.
You are a bird person.
Wow.
We're not trucking them above.
We
the
go in your
fold.
turns to come.
Please
down.
remove the bird people from the room.
I mean, Ken, I didn't have any additional, comments or anything to make on this. I mean, I'm definitely in favor of it, but I think we're in the same boat where we're gonna have to have a electronic vote from ESC till we have a quorum.
Yeah, and that's fine. And if people have comments now about things we could do better in the report, like I'm happy to go back and do that if there's any of that. If we need more information, like knowing that you don't have a quorum right now, that's fine. I'm happy to take feedback for how we can improve this if it needs to be improved or anything like that.
Do you want to ask specifically the woman from Department of Ag? Because this is not really an ag related habitat issue, whether she'd be comfortable voting.
Stephanie, are you hearing our muttering under our breath here?
Yes, I want to be consistent in my.
Yeah, all right.
Actually,
Yeah.
I'm gonna. What is John gonna vote?
Well, are we going to take that up for all of the proposed listings
The permits, you mean?
or the permits
Yeah.
rather? Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I mean, we're gonna have a ton of stuff probably. Well, although, I mean, Brian thought maybe by noon, but more likely 1. So, I mean, my kind of thought is we just, force Brian to, we just like talk really fast at him and then say, well.
My only hesitation with the permits is that we issue the permits.
Yes, yeah. No, so I was not gonna ask you to vote on the permits. So, yeah.
Because I have connectivity with Brian Pfeiffer, he actually just texted me and said he's driving. I don't know if that means he's on his way or.
Oh, wow. Okay, nice. Yeah. That might be, he might be close. No, like I said, there's gonna be probably a bunch of other stuff we're gonna have to look at electronically, so find recuse here and we can keep moving.
Is Brian our only other possibility? I just wondered, because I think the link that Roz had sent out just this morning, I initially tried to get in through that and was just like sitting there forever. I never got in through that, but then when I tried again through the link in the agenda, it worked. So I don't know if anyone could be having technical difficulties in joining.
Yeah, no. Paul is in Italy.
We offered to give him a ride, but he didn't respond.
Allie is also on vacation. So, yeah. So unfortunately, we're short. Okay. Onward, where are we?
I just ended by just saying, like, if there's any feedback for the report, I'm happy to go back and change things or try to add things or whatever. I'm happy. Please provide feedback if you need it.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
I mean, seems like a compelling proposal to me.
Yeah, I agree. Okay. Thanks, Ken. Thanks to your team. Appreciate it.
Yep, you're welcome. Thanks for all you guys are doing. And if anyone comes up with anything later, feel free to email me. I'm happy to talk more about this.
Ken, did you guys ever go after any Lake Champlain Basin money for some mussel monitoring?
There's money going to Michael Lou Smith, I think, to do resurveying from old surveys and things like that. Yeah.
Okay, good. That's great.
And we really are. Mark Ferguson, I just talked to him the other day. He's pretty busy right now with some mud puppy work, which is why he isn't here today. But he was telling me that we're getting close to having a complete sort of freshwater mussel draft recovery finally, that we could actually maybe eventually come. Maybe I'm going to go out on a limb and say we could come in September with that to you, maybe.
Okay. All right. Well, let's see. I guess maybe then I'm wondering if maybe next it might make sense to Matt, if you want to talk about the sunflower permit application. It sounded like that one was a relatively straightforward one.
Yeah, that
And I
was
think
definitely.
okay, and I think that it sounded like Grace may come for the orchid conversation, so it's a
Yeah.
little bit further down the agenda.
Sure. So you want me to just jump in on the sunflower?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. So I guess just as context for folks not up on all of our rare or listed plants, the harsh sunflower Helianthus stromosus has been, I guess in some ways I'd say a challenging species to have listed because it has it's morphologically variable, and confident identification is just a challenge frequently. And we've gone through various efforts to try to clarify that situation. Art Gilman, one of our members and author of the Flora of Vermont, had done a particular targeted, morphometric study of herbarium specimens and so forth, trying to basically come up with some better identification parameters and keys and tools and so forth, just to enable us to be more confident in any given situation that yes, indeed, we are actually dealing with the correct or the true species that we're trying to regulate. And so that's all just to say that this is a species that definitely can use some work, and this proposal seems really specifically crafted, including involvement by Art Gilman, one of our members, to help clarify the situation around identifying this listed species and just what exactly do we have. So it's a polyploid species, really more of a species complex, and there's a thought that there's probably actually more than one species entity involved here, and so this entire research proposal is crafted around figuring out what we really have and then generating some better identification tools that would, among other things, ultimately support the work that we do through the Flora SAG and this committee and dealing with permitting around stromosus. So I guess in terms of the specifics of this application, they're seeking to collect a single whole plant individual from a large proportion of all of our known populations. I think it was 28 sites that they had proposed to sample from. The need to collect an entire plant, including the roots, is particularly because there are morphological characteristics of those roots that are not well represented in existing herbarium specimens. And so that's the need to collect whole plants as opposed to just sort of taking the above ground portions of the plant. That would be less disruptive, obviously, and less I guess, lethal to that individual. These are clonally reproducing, or at least that's one of their modes of reproduction. So the individual stems are often connected underground. So just harvesting the top portion wouldn't necessarily kill that plant, whereas digging it up does kill that individual. What other specific points to highlight here? We were pretty much fully supportive of this. The only sort of thing that we wanted to flag was that a few of the sites at least have the potential to have many co-occurring rare species, and that could be harmed through this digging up of a specimen. And the applicants were, glad to hear about that and very much want to minimize any impacts around that. So we had some suggestions as to how we might approach minimizing that, but maybe I should leave it there and just see if there are questions from others around this.
My only question, Matt, is you've got something like 28 occurrences. I mean, do most of those sites have decent populations of sunflower?
Yeah, it does vary fairly widely. There are some that are pretty small, but the majority of them are relatively large. I think the application, the big table of proposed populations, gave some indications of the population sizes there. And some of them are, hundreds of individuals. I think the largest one actually, I mean, it's sort of scattered over probably a mile or more of sort of a metapopulation. Many hundreds of individual stems. So I think there was a minimum threshold of there needing to be 10 stems to collect anything from a population when they go out and find them, and that sort of brings it to this sort of 10% threshold that we try not to exceed. And certainly their intent is to target the larger populations. We do have somewhat more. I don't have the exact count of what our total known population count is right at my fingertips, but it's not absolutely every one of our populations that they're seeking, but they are trying to get a really robust sampling across the entire state to really understand what's going on.
Any other questions for Matt? All right. Well, thanks for that, Matt. We will.
Sure.
We'll just, like I said, we'll just talk really fast when Brian gets here and say, just vote yes.
Sounds good.
Yeah. Let's see. So,
I mean, we can dive into the Ram's Head as well. I think Grace was thinking to join. I guess we're still a little bit ahead of time.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I guess, Rich, do you want to talk about the fish proposal? Okay. Yeah. Lamprey. Fish sag. So go for it. Do you want me to pull something up? I think.
The narrative. I hope I've got some diagrams here. It's a fairly important application. I'll get into that in a minute. A lot of consideration went into this one. Before we get to that, I can start with a little description of the applications for the refurbishment and replacement of a bridge on Creek Farm Road in Colchester, which crosses the lower section of Indian Brook. Indian Brook represents the only Vermont record for this species. It's rated as endangered S1 for Vermont, SGCN species of high level 1, G5 globally, which I think is kind of high. Its populations are on the decline. It is a western glacial refugia species, like about half of our fish emanated from the Mississippi Valley area following the passage of the last glacier. This was one of them, which makes the area in Vermont come back to the easternmost point of distribution. So we're on the periphery of several species. That doesn't. Can you magnify that a little?
Not right now.
Okay. Well, as you can plainly see, the bottom there represents the difference between the adult habitat and the amosete, which is the larvae. Adults spawn in hard bottom, fairly swift current. In Indian Brook, that is represented from about Route 7 down a few hundred yards. After that, the gradient levels out to just about lake level. And you have a bottom that's primarily soft, silt sand, organic type of material substrate, which is great habitat for amicetes. So the adults spawn up in the hard bottom areas, eggs hatch, the little amicetes float downstream and burrow into the substrate as filter feeders, and last about 5 to 7 years. At the end of that, they metamorphose into adults and move upstream. So they're non-parasitic, they're small, spending their entire life cycle in a particular stream. They're, in terms of spread, they are not very fecund, and they don't spread easily because they're pretty much wedded to a single stream. Their habitat, I'll get back to the global distribution. Their habitat is, or their distribution essentially is made up of several disjunct populations, ranging from the northern Great Lakes in Ontario and the United States east to the St. Lawrence. New York State's is pretty interesting. There's a couple of records up in the upper Richelieu of St. Lawrence. And then there's no records over the entire state till you get to the extreme west end. There's a drainage that rivers empty into Lake Erie, which is the extreme left end of New York State, and that's it. There's nothing in between. And then you have this little population up in the St. Lawrence, and then the single population here in Indian Brook in Vermont. The bridge is situated pretty much in the middle, or the proposed bridge is situated in the middle of the Amazigh population. The primary impact that we were concerned with was the fact that the applicant said they would have to dewater 2,000 square feet on either side of the bridge in order to improve the abutments and replace them, which are failing. That amounts to, my rough figure, 90 to 100 feet of stream length. And when you consider the entire stream length of Amazigh habitat, it converts to a little less than 1%. The V.S.A, our advice is that they grant the permit with one condition. And that condition is when they're dewatering, if they see any little squiggly things in the stream that are stressful, pick them up, throw them in a bucket, and take them downstream. It's a very simple request. One of our members, Will Eldridge, talked to Bernie Pienka, who is a regional fish biologist in Burlington, and he wasn't concerned with the possibility that they may pass a few sea lampreys as well. There's also silver lampreys there as well. So we think that's a reasonable condition to put forward. See what else. The only other thing we were concerned with on the form was I did mention that the applicant, in a general sense, attempt to minimize any sedimentation or passage of turbidity downstream of the project. It was our concern, not being an engineer, I wouldn't know how they'd go about that. So it was just, I put that as a comment, as a concern. The amicetes of the Northern Brook lamprey are somewhat sensitive to silt. Up to about 75% silt is okay. Anything more than that, there's not enough sand for them, and their numbers tend to drop off in areas that are dominated by silt. So that's about it. So we do recommend that they grant the application. The only other comment I had was when I was looking at the plans there, the pink area is the area that's going to be dewatered. The gray area on the right is the temporary bridge, which is going to be put up. As I said, this is a dirt road, single lane bridge. It services 2 farms and a residence. And I looked on the Colchester site, the town site, and they're going to spend $1 million on this. $1 million for this. Seemed awful high. Seemed like a lot of work for a bridge to, go across a stream that's maximum 20 feet wide. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah.
I did reach out to Chris Brunel from DEC stream alteration. I think they're going to need an alteration permit, but I haven't heard from him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Any questions?
Go ahead. Yeah.
Just wondering, is it worthwhile to have a fish biologist on site to grab little squiggly creatures or make sure that people are noticing them?
They would have to hire a consultant. Yeah. I don't think there's much of a precedent for this. The Sea Lamprey Control Program, what they did is the applicant went out ahead of time in Trout Brook and shocked out American brook lamprey in the past and moved them upstream prior to the treatment. This is, anybody can pick up a snake like a little natter just by hand. It just seemed like the right thing to do.
Just making sure they're going to notice them, right? Depending on who's out there, are they really paying attention?
Yeah, right. I suppose, if the project, they're going to spend $1 million on the project, we could alter the condition to have the applicant hire a consultant on stream during the dewatering process and have them just constantly going up and down the property. I'd be open to altering it if people suggest.
Well, I was gonna maybe just ask, in terms of that, so they'll put the temporary dam in, and assuming, water drains, you've dewatered, how long would lamprey survive then?
I don't know. I think they'd survive a while if the substrate was wet enough.
Okay.
Few days, but I think this is, a week process, couple of weeks.
Okay. Yeah.
I didn't mention that they're going to place a culvert below the dam.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Right.
That'll pass the water down through the culvert.
Okay.
Did the fish SAG consider electrofishing in this instance? You mentioned it at Trout Brook.
That wasn't brought up. It's different. Fish and Wildlife Department has the proper equipment. I'm retired from the biomonitoring section, and our electrofishing probes aren't designed to pick them up like some of the Fish and Wildlife Department probes are. But we did get them, so that's a possibility. That is a possibility, and it's a fairly short section.
Yeah, it seems pretty concentrated.
Yeah.
So culvert goes in first, then they would, okay. This sounds like a Endangered Species Committee field trip, don't you think? Like when they put the dam in,
Well, I have a picture of it if you want.
Yeah.
It goes down. Yeah, there. I got that off Google Maps.
I guess it's
that's it. And it's not a highly traveled road. Indian Brook dumps into that large wetland you see off the interstate when you're going north of Burlington, and also Pond Brook and Mallett's Brook feed into that entire wetland there, and then it goes into Mallett's Bay.
Yeah, it's like we could get rid of some knotweed too on the right side. Like so, there's a lot of work for us to do here. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I'm just wondering. So it sounds like there's 2 potential sources of take here. There's the adults, and then there's the ammoseats. It sounds like maybe there's a good chance some ammosetes would be taken through the dewatering because I'm assuming they're quite small and would be less likely to be noticed and therefore moved. I mean, do we, in terms of the permit and such, does it need to take into account, you know, some kind of projected number of ammosetes that are expected to be killed through this dewatering process? I mean, just thinking of, it sounds like you're comfortable with that it's a level of impact that the species can, or population can be okay with, but just in terms of being consistent with how we approach other permits and accounting for the individuals that are actually taken.
Right. The data is not complete enough to come up with a concentration. The stream is hard to sample, especially when you go downstream. It becomes non-weightable. That's hard to even get a boat in there. I've sampled upstream. I'm only concerned with ammosetes here. You won't find any of the adults. The ammosetes are actually larger than the adults. They shrink a little bit, so they could be 6-7 inches long coming out of there.
Okay, that's helpful to understand. Thanks.
Yeah, we really don't know. There may be no ammosetes underneath the bridge. You know?
Yeah.
You have to jump through some assumptions to come up with a condition and the ultimate recommendation. I can certainly float that idea of those two alternatives to the fish sag, and see which, you know, what we come up with.
Yeah.
The alternatives to walking through with a bucket.
What do you do, Jim, for mud puppies? I mean, do you have a volunteer group that goes out when they're
treating?
Yeah.
Actually, Fish and Wildlife puts it together. Steve used to put it together for a while. And we go out in canoes at night with lights, and we travel up and down the river and net any mud puppy that we see that appears to be impacted, you know, coming up for air or struggling, and then dump them into a freshwater container with a bubbler in it until after the pulse of them has passed through, and then they're released the next day.
I just, I don't know. I mean, I think, a consultant would be one thing. I just wonder if there would be, just a group of, I mean, it seems like at some point, we're going to know exactly when they're going to put the temporary dam in. I mean, it just seems like a bunch of people, like even just standing on the bridge with binoculars or something like that and scanning the mud might be, fairly, easy to just get a little crew together and go out as, right as the dewatering is occurring. That seems like that's when they'd be squiggliest and most visible. So, yeah.
Good ESC outing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Do they have a conservation commission? It seems like you might be able to get some volunteers.
Yeah, it's been done before with sea level rate control program.
Yeah.
It seems like something like that might be appropriate. I know that it's a small municipal project and we don't want to create an undue burden here, but I'm just thinking in terms of not kind of creating a double standard with how we would approach some other, say, commercial project or something. It seems like in most other instances, we would want someone to be there actively, kind of a point person for removing the animal from the area where it could be harmed, doesn't it?
I think the way it's handled sometimes in at least the permit application form would be that the application could be written that a qualified individual or individuals sort of subject to qualification review by Fish and Wildlife Department would do the monitoring if that's not known at the time of the application submittal.
Yeah, the project time would be right in the middle of the summer, July, August.
And in this case, it sounds like the qualified or the conditions for qualifying are are a pretty low bar.
That's not a harsh sunflower.
Well, yeah, I mean, because you had actually said it was, you were not going to worry about moving sea lamprey. You would, anything. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's, when I first saw the application, a lot of flashing red lights went up.
Yeah, right.
Indian Brook.
Oh, yeah, right, yeah.
It's the farthest east of, any of the species, any of the records.
Yeah.
And we need to assert a maximum level of protection. And there's also the possibility that downstream siltation might occur. So it may not, the impact potentially may not be limited to the 2,000 square feet around the bridge. So the volunteers are, that alternative seems reasonable. I just wonder, I mean, we could probably get a couple of members of the SAG to go.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not sailing my boat at that time of the year, I'd do it myself,
If I'm around, I'm in. I'd go. Be a lifer species for me.
Yeah.
I did put in the chat, they do have a conservation commission, and it might be, while the Endangered Species Committee, and I would be willing to go as well, because the sound of being outside of an office in July sounds lovely. But it would also be good, I think, maybe to engage with the Conservation Commission. I know that's not a permitting issue or whatever, but it does seem like an opportunity for education, so.
Yeah, totally agree.
Generally, when we do any of that sort of action, we have a point person there who is the organizer, educator, somebody who's really comfortable with what really needs to be done and where.
Yeah, there's a lot of possibilities there. We probably wouldn't need a whole herd of people, and that would be probably not looked upon favorably by the people working at the bridge.
Well, I mean, if the work was, sanctioned and approved and all of that, it's sort of, at that point, yeah.
Well, I was thinking maybe somebody from Fish and Wildlife Service in Essex.
Yeah.
Still there. Stuff there.
Right, yeah.
They would be able to speciate possibly, or at least break it down between sea lamprey and northern brook. Northern brook are closely related to silver, and there's no way to tell the
Okay, yeah.
So there's that as well. I might be able to get some folks. Doug Facey retired from St. Mike's. He'd be available. Us retired guys have a little more time on that.
Well, I think what I would suggest, and obviously Brian's not here, so we can't do it, but we can just accept the fish SAG recommendations, and we can add something about a qualified individual there to oversee at the time of dewatering, and then take it from there in terms of engaging conservation committee, volunteer, something like that. So I think you're fine with the fish SAG. We can put that in our recommendations.
Okay. I can rewrite. I did do some minor edits to that. That's the raw version, the draft version that I sent out. Alan's on the fish SAG. So I'll send the final version to you.
Okay, perfect.
With the change.
The only other item that I think Matt mentioned a few minutes ago is that there's an unknown number of individuals be collected or impacted in an unknown percentage of the population. And just as a filler outer of these forms from time to time, I know I've been, I think, directed by Art that there sort of has to be a number for better or worse included in that form. Is that
Are you looking at the advice or the actual
In
application?
the application
Okay,
form
yeah.
itself.
Actual numbers. Exactly, yeah.
You know, even if it is in,
Right.
we all know it's unknown, that there has to be sort of
Yeah,
some number and some reason for that number.
I've written and seen a lot of sea lamprey control applications, and they have never mentioned numbers. They tried to elucidate what's there, but never projected, like Winooski treatment on American Brook lamprey. It wasn't included.
Never a number.
No,
Oh, okay.
no. I'm wondering if that's preferred or if it's mandated.
Yeah.
It does seem like something of an inconsistency with relative to some of the later snake permits where it seems like if I was understanding them right, it's sort of a preemptive, there's a single individual, even though there's no actual expectation that it's going to happen, it's sort of just in case something unexpected does happen. It seems like sort of a parallel situation of needing to specify just in case.
That, I guess John just left. I don't know, Roz, do you have a feeling on that? Like, is this something like normally John Cart would say, we can't push this forward with unknown, in terms of the number for the take?
I'm honestly not sure, Alan.
Okay.
I can't imagine this is the first time that's happened. We can't always get numbers.
Yeah.
It seems like
But I can't say for sure.
If nothing else, doesn't it affect the fees that they have to pay for the permit? Because there's a per individual take fee, correct?
Yes. And I think it's been estimated as best as possible what that take might be. And because we rarely actually have an exact number for that for a lot of these species.
Yeah, I haven't seen the data, but everywhere I've looked implies that you couldn't even wildly guess at what the concentration is there and divide by the 1% of that. But it's I don't think anybody would hazard a guess. Anybody that I know.
The fee to individual.
Yeah, for the take, you would have to come up with some way of guesstimating it and explain. Yeah, you'd have to come up with an explanation, arrive at something and come up with an explanation as to how you got there, and admit that it's not. You can't come up with a more accurate number. It has to be justified. In order to get to that dollar amount.
Seems like I totally understand the uncertainty. It just seems like there should be consistency across different permitting scenarios and how this is approached.
Yeah, everyone is so unique with how much information you do have and then what assumptions you have to make. And as long as you're laying out what those assumptions are, even with birds, when we often can get pretty close to, how many pairs, it's still an estimate in the end. You still don't know necessarily if every bird has a female, every territorial bird has a female with it. You have to make an assumption they do. And so it's pretty, I'm not sure how we would standardize that than to be as accurate as possible. Or explain why we can't be accurate and what our conservative in terms of protection, or conservative estimate would be. That's the route I would suggest taking.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, if you were to use these numbers, you can maybe say why they said unknown, because it would be 186 times 11.4 is the maximum, which would be, over 1,000, potentially over 1,000, also more like 100. So if you were actually talking about, what's the number? Is it 250?
Yeah, it's 250 per individual with a maximum of $25,000.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they would be maxed out, right? If they
Yeah.
went with the higher estimate.
Maybe this would be an appropriate time for me to mention that I don't think $250 per individual is prohibitive to almost any development project out there. $250 per individual for projects that run in the millions of dollars, some of them. I mean, it seems like a minimal number.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
That number has been unchanged since it was first developed. It has never been increased.
60s, 70s.
Anyone know what Massachusetts charges per individual taken? I think it's a lot higher.
Okay, I would say we can bring that up for the ESC as well and say that we like to have that number at least estimated, and we think there should be some money.
Seems like if they knew the area of the 2020 survey that documented 80, maybe they could extrapolate to 1,000 square foot area.
Yeah, I mean, you would think. Do you know, Rich, here, the 2020 larval survey, 80?
No, I'm not familiar with any of the data
Is it?
down below in the soft bottom section.
See what they had a citation here. No, they just cite you. I mean, 2020 larval survey. I mean, is that something that's done on a regular basis, or would that have been because of lampricide treatment? Do you have any idea?
Probably not a high priority. They don't treat for sea lamprey on Indian Brook.
Right. Yeah.
That may have been associated with it.
Uh-huh.
I'm not familiar with what Fish and Wildlife Service does or the department. Yeah. They have done work on Pond Brook and Mallett's Creek.
Yeah.
And not found them. But I suppose you could grab that data and just estimate. It'd be a number exercise, essentially.
Indian Brook was never treated.
No.
TFM, it was never one that was proposed.
Okay. No. They tried initially in the 80s to transplant them upstream of the barrier, which is around Route 7, but they never took.
Okay. Well, go ahead, Roz. Did you Google it and found the information for it?
I could be getting ahead of myself, but I'm curious if there were mitigation funds from this, whether it's for 80 or 100, how that could be used to benefit the species. Is it an easy concept of how it could go towards conserving the species, or is that like, how would you want to use that money? And if you don't know, that's fine. I'm just curious what can be done.
Yeah. Like any other of our listed species, they all occur in the lower Champlain drainage. And they receive runoff from sometimes really large drainage areas. And it comes down to water quality and physical habitat degradation from sedimentation. So that's, you'd probably, with a smaller brook, it's easier. You could probably go with improving stormwater protection, agricultural runoff, if there's any in the drainage. Just working towards stabilizing the flow, reducing the amount of erosion and nutrients.
Yep, makes sense. Thanks.
Okay.
And what I can do is go back to the V.S.A and work on the having somebody skilled there, and with an option, I volunteers either from the Conservation Commission or from the V.S.A.
Yeah.
Go down during that dewatering process.
Mhm. Okay.
And see what they say and get back to y'all.
Okay. Yeah, and we will, I think we should, and this can be the ESC's responsibility, try to find the 2020 survey and see if there's any way to get a density estimate from that. I mean, no larval density data are available, but it feels like there must have been at least some length that they sampled that would be in that.
Yeah.
I mean, it hardly seems like a study if they don't have some sort of a some kind of effort estimation. So, okay. All right. That sounds good. All right. Thanks, Rich. Fish Sag. Grace, let me tell you what's going on here. We have no quorum. We're just hearing from the experts, and then when we get our quorum, we're gonna fast talk Brian Pfeiffer in terms of quick summarizing of what happened, and then hopefully vote yes. Yeah. So if you want to jump in and tell us what's going on with the is it Rams?
Sure. Yeah. I might let Matt. I think Matt was planning on presenting it.
Okay. Yeah.
Either way is fine by me, Grace. Yeah. I can certainly.
Okay.
I mean.
Sure, go for it, and then I'll.
Okay, yeah. You fill in any details. I mean, you've been much more involved in the behind the scenes discussions with the applicants and so forth. But I guess just for brief context, Ram's Head Lady Slipper it's a widely distributed orchid on our landscape, but it's one like a number of our orchids that have been in pretty significant decline in recent decades throughout New England, really. So it's a species of concern in that particular regard, in addition to just having small populations and few of them. It's interesting that we had a recovery plan to discuss earlier. This research permit, I guess, it's been challenging for Flora-Sag to deal with this permit in part because we don't have something like a recovery plan already in place for this species or any species really. This was a case where the proposed work in some ways gets ahead of a larger recovery planning process or has the potential to do that, and so we were I guess challenged to figure out how to not impede valuable work happening and developing knowledge, but at the same time not wanting to get ourselves into a problematic situation of having a whole bunch of propagated plants that we needed to figure out what to do with and so forth. So I guess just to back up then, the research proposal coming from folks at the New Hampshire Academy of Sciences was to collect two things, leaf tissue samples and also seeds from a single population of ram's head lady slipper located in Stratford, Vermont. The applicant has done some monitoring of this population in the past, and they have, it seems like, fairly extensive experience and background doing propagation work with orchids, which, as I'm sure most of you know, are finicky, involve, in their natural state, typically involve mycorrhizal partnerships that are essential to the germination and reproduction of the very tiny dust-like seeds. And for ram's head in particular, apparently there has been very little prior success in doing sort of ex situ propagation of the species, and this organization has had, I guess, an unusual degree of success in propagating other related Cypripedium or lady slipper species, specifically the showy lady slipper and yellow lady slippers, that are considered uncommon in Vermont but are not listed species. And so they're seeking to sort of extend that research into ram's head with a long-term perspective of contributing to some kind of restoration or population augmentation efforts for the species. Lacking that broader recovery plan, Flora-SAG sort of worked with them to scale back their initial research proposal that was seeking multi-year sampling and perhaps more extensive propagation of these plants. And so what we've sort of worked back to was a single year of sampling of leaf tip tissue to allow them to explore the genetic diversity of the species, and then collection of one single green pod that they then sort of after ripen in the lab, harvest a portion of the seeds from, and then return the remaining seeds back to the population. They would then use the collected seeds to do propagation trials and refine their methodology around trying to propagate this species. And Flora-SAG is proposing a condition that would basically limit the number of plants that they could end up with coming out of this process. We were concerned that based on their prior success with other species, there was the potential for them to end up generating, hundreds or even thousands of plants. A single orchid pod has large numbers of seeds, thousands of seeds. And if we found ourselves in that situation, we would be sort of at a loss for what to productively do with all of those plants, and not wanting to completely swamp the naturally occurring population there, and also not wanting to get into mixing populations, putting them out in other places in the landscape and that sort of thing without some kind of comprehensive thought out plan in place for doing that work, which is I think that generating such a plan is not necessarily within the expertise of the applicant themselves. So I don't know if you want to switch to the SAG advice form at all, Alan, just to refresh on the conditions we had proposed there. So we were suggesting conditions around making sure landowner permission is all squared away, because this site is located on private lands, and particularly with the outplanting portion of the project, that really needs to be all on the up and up and clear from the get-go. We wanted to see some regular status updates as different parts of the project unfolded. There's been some, I guess, maybe communication challenges in the process with the executive director of the organization not directly handling the communications. And so we just wanted to make sure that things were really clear what was happening. And then the propagation trials being limited in terms of how many potential plants it could put out. We sort of chose the number 100, which is a somewhat arbitrary number, but seemed like a reasonable number of total plants that could reasonably potentially be put back on the site without being too burdensome to anyone or to the naturally occurring population there. And then the final piece, really, particularly since we don't have this larger comprehensive recovery plan in place for the species, was just wanting to, I guess, assert control over the fate of residual plants, seeds, and as well as any genetic material, extracts, and leaf tissue from the sampling, so that SAG Flora and the ESC, Fish and Wildlife Department, have a say in what happens further with those materials. So I guess, Grace, do you have things you want to add to that, or further background or anything?
Just reiterating the landowner issue. This is something that has been concerning to me because we sometimes trust applicants when they say that they have had the landowner's permission. I mean, this is a researcher who's been on this site every year for many years, and they said, oh yeah, the landowner's totally fine with us being there. When we pressed them, as Matt suggested, they actually, I don't think you know this, Matt, but the applicant told me that, I found out that our PI actually hadn't gotten permission for like over a decade or talked to this landowner. And so I just had this image of like, what if we approve and this work is done and this parcel landowner finds out? I mean, it could really blow up in a pretty bad way. And yeah, we've heard horror stories from other states, having landowners find out that there's work on their parcels when states have had to delete, like all sorts of data from the heritage, just really bad things. So it was a reminder, I'm kind of saying this like as a reminder to myself that we always should have written permission landowners, even if researchers are saying that they have like a good established relationship with the private landowners. They actually reached out today, the applicant, and said we're working on it, but we haven't done it. So also wanted to say that told them that it needs to be written, but they can provide the permission by email. But if it's by email, the landowner, he lives in Boston, he needs to explicitly say, I'm the owner, parcel, span number, blah, 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 and I give permission to this organization to do this work, including outputting. It's a pretty big deal. So that's that issue. Definitely wanted to just be clear on the fact that they're not going to actually get a permit until we receive that, and the applicant knows that. They want to do this field work in May, late, or maybe June. So they know that they have a little bit of time, but they're not going to have a permit in hand. And then, yeah, anything about that?
No, I appreciate that very late breaking update on what the situation is. Yeah, they're definitely part of FLAG's challenges around this, or I guess, communications with the applicants, and maybe some red flags at various points along the way that raised questions of trust in our mind. I think most of which have really been allayed, but it's definitely made some bumps in the road for this one.
And more broadly, I think it brings up the fact that this question of landowner permission is going to come up more and more, I think, as we see more population genetics work being proposed. And it brings up the question for me of like, well, what is our role? Is it appropriate for us to... We have researchers reaching out and saying, hey, can you give me the landowner information for parcels with this species on it? Is that an appropriate role for the state to play, or are we not? Is it inappropriate for us to be sharing landowner information with a researcher? That's probably a discussion for another time, but
It'd be good to get Hannah Smith to weigh in on
yeah,
that too.
I agree.
Yeah, yeah.
I just wanted to say also, just briefly, I just reiterating kind of the complexity of this application because of the propagation piece. What came up there was, okay, you have seeds leaving the state, and what happens to them years down the road when they take them out of the fridge? Are those the property of the state of Vermont? And what happens? Do we write the permit in that way that covers the fate of those seeds? We really struggled with that, so I made this very tricky, but that's why we came to this place with the permit conditions where they're required to come back to us with a plan for outplanting. And then if they have left like 100 leftover plants, it's going to be kind of tricky. Do you have them destroyed? Do you have them give them to Garden in the Woods, Native Plant Trust for educational purposes? Certainly don't want them selling them or like planting them out randomly. So that's what we were trying to prevent. Condition.
Yeah, I mean, this is an Academy of Science. You would think, they're going to be around for a while, but something happens with funding. They go to a university or somebody. They say, "Oh, this is a great way to make money. We'll just sell Ram's Head lady slippers and
Market.
financial aid for our students."
Yeah.
Stephanie?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, no, I was wondering whether or not the landowner would have to be a party to the permit in this case, or in any case, similar. I mean, you kind of get at that issue by confirming that there's consent for this organization to go onto the property and collect the seeds. But it just seems that the property owner should be a party to the permit. And then the other item is in the outplanting. Are there, and I didn't read this closely, are there restrictions on the landowner doing anything with those 100 plants that are going to be put back on their property, or should that outplanting occur? And it's probably condition based. This is likely, if these orchids live there, that it has the right conditions for more of the same to live there, or should the outplanting take place on state land? And I'm just thinking of this in terms of, and this is completely unrelated, but when we allow for the collection of ginseng, if someone comes across, and I'm not quoting the law or the rule in any way, shape, or form, but my recollection is that the seeds have to be, if ginseng comes to us for the inspection, and we inspect and it doesn't meet the years that we require for ginseng, then that ginseng gets returned to the state, and then the state gets to plant that somewhere. And so I wasn't sure if there was some other, like, why the outplanting on the property owner's land if this is a T&E species? Why not planting on state land where it's a little more controlled? Anyway. Just some thoughts, and you guys have this process down way more than I do. So,
no, I appreciate those thoughts, Stephanie, and actually that's an interesting wrinkle to the ginseng story. Not to go off down that tangent, but I didn't realize that particular aspect of it, and I'm not sure that that's ever actually come about. But it'd be an interesting things to explore. I mean, because we do. I mean, in general, we don't just want to be sort of establishing new populations of rare species sort of willy-nilly on the landscape. And so the idea with this was that, we think in terms of mycorrhizae and things like that the orchid needs should be present on the site, so there'd be a greater likelihood of success. And also, we're not creating some new, either a new, introducing new genetics to another known population, or creating some wholly new site that potentially causes or creates a management concern, or just fails because there's no particular, it's hard to pinpoint what's going to be an appropriate site for this species. So that is why we we went with the idea of putting them back on the original site, even though, yeah, there is less control because it's privately owned and that kind of thing. So, yeah.
Thank you.
One, presumably, this is, not really the focus of the application, but they are going to tell you something about the genetic diversity that's present in these plants, right? So, you would probably get some information as to whether or not you actually might want to think about outbreeding at some point. I would say it's probably out of the scope of this particular project, but that information on the genetic diversity might tell you something about, are you just reintroducing inbred populations back with their inbred brethren, or does it make sense to actually try to, think about some, prescribed outbreeding, I guess I would say.
Yeah. Certainly that's the hope, that we'll get some good genetic information. I think I guess we've been frustrated by various aspects of the initial proposal not seeming to be the most ideally crafted. I think if you were really trying to get a clear picture of the genetics for this species, you'd need to sample more than one population to be able to actually make those inferences about differences between populations. But it should result in some sort of information about the genetics of at least this one population. If I'm remembering correctly, they have some comparison, or they have some existing data for some main populations of this species that they've also worked with. So there'll be some ability to compare with another population, but it's fairly limited in terms of really providing a robust picture of the population genetics for our populations in Vermont. But yeah, we do see some benefit there. Otherwise, I guess we wouldn't have supported that aspect of the proposed activities at all.
Yeah, and one huge benefit, I think, is we don't know if outplanting is even viable at all for this species.
Right.
For a lot of orchids, they just die and you plant them out. So we do want to know if that's a potential strategy for the future, seeing as how, we have over 10 population, probably like more like 20 historical sites for this species where they've disappeared, and they're declining on a lot of the extant sites, which are very few now. So that is good, and we really tried hard to work with the applicant because we think that is valuable. And then just to mention, in the future, they are interested in potentially sampling from other sites in Vermont to get a broader picture, and we really would need that to know if we should be like, okay, if we're going to augment populations, where are we going to get the seeds from?
Yeah,
this should be a good way. It's my hope to build trust with the applicant before we move on to giving them locality data for other sites.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, before I forget, Abby, if you want to make a note about whether or not we want to talk about whether Fish and Wildlife should be giving out information on locations of T&E species to researchers.
Which didn't come up here,
right?
Yeah, they knew about
right,
it.
Yeah,
yeah. In the future, if they want private land,
yeah,
they want population info from private lands,
mm-hmm.
And it's coming up all the time now with a lot of research proposals lately.
Mm-hmm.
Some not listed.
Yeah.
But I also wanted to mention, I hadn't thought so much about the management question. Like, do we want to include something that is like the area where the present plants are and the new plants must be managed in a certain way? This population is on a logging road, an old logging road, and it seems like nobody has talked to the landowner in quite a long time about that. Who knows when he might decide, oh, I want to harvest again, or
Right.
That, I think we'll have an opportunity to address those kinds of questions as long as we have a really clear condition that before the outplanting happens, they need to come back to us.
Mhm.
And my understanding, at least, is the outplanted plants, assuming that all actually happens, they would still be considered protected plant individuals of the listed species. So there's still that in place.
Right.
I
And
did.
that's why the ownership question is so important.
Yeah.
Right. I don't, at this point, I'm questioning whether the landowner even knows that he has a state listed species on his parcel. It's problematic. And I actually told the applicant, like, please be clear about this.
Yeah.
This is a state protected species.
Yep. Yeah, it's been a particularly funny proposal in terms of some of the communications and around things like this for us to grapple with. Marked contrast to the Helianthus permit that we dealt with earlier.
Yeah. It's a weird situation, you know. I mean, it occurs sometimes when for birding as well. You talk to a landowner and they're like, "Yeah, come back anytime. You know, feel free." And then, you know, it's like, what did that, was that permission for a month, or was it permission
Right.
for a year? Or was it permission for, what did I just get there? So,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. Well, I guess maybe I'll ask Matt, you and Grace. Carla, feel free to weigh in. Did anything come up here that you felt like you wanted to alter? Advice to the Roz, look at your computer. What the hell are you doing?
Yeah, she's looking out the window at birds.
Yeah.
I'm nursing
blame
a
you.
concussion, so I'm actually trying not to look at my computer. So I have a really good excuse right now.
Yeah. All right. I guess I was going to just say, did anything come up in this conversation that you wanted to alter, or anything you feel like ESC should mention above and beyond in terms of your conditions?
I don't think so, other than maybe our first suggested condition could even be strengthened to make sure that the communication with the landowner is clear around it being a listed species. I don't know. Carla, anything else jumping out to you?
Yeah, I mean, the landowner permission and the importance of having the landowner permission perhaps at the time of permit issuance for the future outplanting, so that we don't wind up in the situation, even though they have to come back to you, that then in 1 or 2 years it becomes a question of like, crap, where do these go now if the landowner permission fell through for whatever reason?
Yeah, I mean,
That gets to my, I was just gonna say that gets to my maybe last question, Carla, which is, do they need a takings permit in 2 years to do the outplanting? We were not totally clear. Flag thought they didn't. They just needed to consult with us. But I could see the appeal having to, it's a bit more firm, like, do we need another permit instead of just kind of wishy-washy, like, you need to come back to us with your plan.
yeah, I mean, I feel like we might need the lawyers to weigh in on it, kind of thing. I mean, I think when you're talking about putting plants back out onto a site, it's sort of the opposite of our usual scenario of impacting plants that are, or species that are already on a site. And I'm not sure if that's entirely clear in how it's handled by the statute. I'd have to look back at our language on this.
What did we do? This is a long time ago, but what did we do concerning reintroducing peregrines and eagles?
Yeah.
Spruce grouse.
Spruce grouse,
Yeah.
were permits needed in those instances? It's to reintroduce, I don't know.
Now we'd have tariffs on spruce grouse too.
Well, definitely if we start exporting ram's head to Canada, that'll get involved.
I don't think peregrines were reintroduced in Vermont.
Right, in order to get the birds.
Yeah.
I was.
It seems like it's in the ESC's interest to cover it, to minimize the paperwork really, and cover it with that language.
Yeah.
Come back to you for permission, get permission.
Yeah.
And cover it in one permit.
Yeah, I think that's okay.
I've seen that
Yeah.
kind of language
Yeah.
used before.
Okay.
That was
And
our
maybe
hope, I
if for
think.
whatever reason there's a delay, right? Because this permit would have a 5-year shelf life. That if that 5 years is exceeded, then they would have to
Yeah,
get another
sure,
permit
yeah.
or an extension.
Yeah.
So the application says that the permit is just from May to September
Oh, okay.
this year.
Mm-hmm.
But it sounds like the group is saying it would make more sense to issue a 5-year permit.
I guess I'm not sure exactly how it gets specified in the actual permit. I think what we want to, what we're saying we're okay with is a single season of sampling activity. Whether that happens, next year or the year after that or something like that is, we don't necessarily need to specify, or we can be open to flexibility around that, but we just don't want them sampling again and again. And obviously there's an expiration on how long that could get pushed out till.
Yeah, I'm thinking that maybe we just leave it as is, and essentially the permit is for the collection, and the fact that we're talking about consultation for the outplanting, maybe we're okay with that time frame, and that, I mean, essentially also, protects all of you from additional sampling if we made a longer permit length. So, where you might have to come back and address all these questions again. So maybe it's fine as is.
And they don't have to come back for a permit for outplanting.
But for consultation, yeah, right. And I don't know, you could, Roz or John, you could run it by Hannah and see what they think about, the outplanting piece.
I mean, there's an adult bald eagle storing by our house.
Peregrines were hacked, I think, in Vermont, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they were hacked.
Oh, I didn't think they were. I thought that was just New
Oh,
Hampshire.
yeah. Nope, long time ago.
Oh,
Yep.
Oh, there's our quorum. Just appeared.
Yeah.
All right, Brian, we're gonna vote on like 10 things right now. You ready?
Yeah, I vote no on everything. Sorry,
Wrong answer.
Yeah.
sorry I couldn't make it. I was just, I had a conflict that I just could not resolve this morning.
Yeah, no, that's all right. Well, I think we're good then. I would say let's take a break here. I'm just gonna run out and use the restroom, Brian, but I'll come back and kind of brief you on where we were and get you up to speed on what we're trying to get done here.
Okay, so we haven't voted on pretty much anything on the agenda?
We haven't, but we've gotten updates and kind of come to consensus on where we want to move with them, and we can give you some overviews and let you weigh in.
Okay, are we taking a lunch break now? When will we be back for this?
Well, I guess officially, I mean, I would say if we want to try to get everything done by 2, we should try to take keep it to a half an hour lunch break. But if you've got a few minutes, before then, I can get you up to speed on each of these permit discussions.
Okay. Do you want to do that on the phone, Alan, instead of on the meeting time here? You want to give me a call, or what would work best?
Sure. Yeah,
Okay.
I can give you a call.
Okay. Great.
Is that,
All right.
Is that a legit
Sounds good.
approach in terms of our open meeting? Anyway,
It's not a quorum, so you're gonna
Yeah,
have.
Right, yeah.
Before you head out to lunch.
great.
Okay, thanks, everyone. We'll shoot for 1 o'clock.
You know, Charlotte Wildlife Park.
Yeah, yeah.
And she's been doing some,
We were gonna suggest, well, why don't we, yeah, whenever you're ready to fire us up again. Oh, there you go. Like right at 1 o'clock. Did you see that? Perfect timing. We were just talking the break, Abigail, about sort of the lack of clarity around department personnel not voting, and something that if we don't solve it between now and then, we might ask Secretary Moore to address that at the next V.S.A. meeting. Because it would be great to get her take on that as well, I think. So, yeah.
Well, and to provide clarity for the future.
Yeah.
It seems like in many ways, having a representative like Stephanie from Agency of Ag, part of the point of having them as a part of the committee is so that they could voice those concerns and vote. So it does seem a little bit odd if they're not allowed to vote.
Yeah. If you have a limited size.
yeah, I mean, that was the designation of the designing of the committee was to have votes from various different, areas.
And I bet the assumption was that they would vote,
Yeah.
not to recuse themselves.
Yeah, I think basically just abstain, sort of been an abstention. I think they haven't necessarily said recusing because of conflict of interest.
Oh.
Just
Okay.
Just
Well, yeah, I wasn't
abstain.
really distinguishing between the two, but yeah.
Okay. Brian's here. So excited. I guess maybe what we'll do. So I've gotten Brian up to speed on the things that we've talked about. What I might just do to kind of stick a little bit with the agenda, Mark, if you want to do the grasshopper sparrow permit application.
Yep.
I guess in this particular case, it's not a location confidential, but you are going to have to recuse yourself on this one too. So this will be something that we're going to have to vote on electronically. But if you want to sort of run through it.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So basically, we're looking at the development of an industrial park adjacent to the Morristown Airport. And I guess 4 years ago now, in 2001, surveys were conducted, and at least at this one of the sites that they surveyed, where they would like to build a structure, they found a grasshopper sparrow. It was not reported at the time, and when the application was put before Noel, he found this documentation of a grasshopper sparrow within the application permit. And also during that survey, they also found, supposedly found grasshopper sparrows, I guess, to the east of the airport, north of the airport, on an adjacent landowner's property. So when presented to the SAG, and with all of the conflict, or I wouldn't say conflict, let's use a different word, with all of the goings on at Franklin County Airport and challenges at Camp Johnson with the change in vegetation there, and grasshopper sparrow being having such small populations. Basically, the SAG was not comfortable in saying yes to that permit application just for lack of information as to what is actually, whether or not those sparrows are using that site, and whether there's potential, and correct me if I'm wrong, if there's mitigation for grasshopper sparrows on the adjacent site. So in this particular instance, we recommend to the Endangered Species Committee that permit not be, that takings permit not be applied or signed or whatever. They want to do the work this coming spring. And so it was, I guess, a pretty quick turnaround time. But that, I think a lot of it just centered on the uncertainty of grasshopper sparrows in Vermont. And not having enough information to know if this is another small population, which may support the others before, and so didn't feel comfortable in saying that they agreed with this permit application.
Roz, go ahead.
Just a little more information background is that this was a strange one, and that survey was not prompted by us. That they did that survey without us requiring one, because the area of grassland habitat impact didn't meet it wasn't large enough for us to
Thank you,
be able
Roz.
to ask for a survey. So it's unfortunate they waited 3 years to tell us the data, and yet they, I guess, wouldn't have had a requirement to share it with us either. I'm not sure about that. Perhaps if they know of a listed species being there, they would have been required. And they did let us know, but not until it was like sort of too late to conduct our own surveys. Or to do them again more, after 2021. That's all.
So do we need additional information? Would we want new surveys done this?
Yeah, I think
Yes.
Yes, that was the plan. Is we need to know more before we feel comfortable as a technical advisory committee to say, go ahead with that project.
This is the VFWD's advice.
I'm curious, is there sort of a standard lifespan of surveys for bird data? I know for plants, for permitting purposes, we typically, I believe it's a 3-year sort of lifespan that a survey is considered valid for.
Yeah, that's a. I don't think we've ever really considered that.
Yeah, I was the one thing, not knowing that much about this particular site, but knowing that grasshopper sparrows oftentimes are much more likely to show up in places like shortly after disturbance. So, essentially, like if you were thinking about a cornfield that you let grow fallow, probably in the first couple of years would be the time when grasshopper sparrows would be likely to show up. And as that starts to fill in, unlikely that they would be there. But even so, it seems it's just challenging with 4-year-old data.
Yeah, so another tough one in that from what we gleaned, the person that did the surveys was Not just, you know, somebody driving along and saying, I heard a grasshopper sparrow in there, but they were conducted and similar to Franklin County, you know, fortunately, I mean, this came out prior to the actual work being done, but had it not been picked up by Noel, and correct me if I'm wrong, Roz, there's the potential it could have been another situation like Franklin County where they maybe moved ahead with work and then all of a sudden the information, you know, came to light or something like that. So the SAG, just with all that's happening with the grasshopper sparrow population, and this being a case of just not knowing if there are birds present there, and if they are, we just didn't feel comfortable in recommending this permit application to the ESC.
Yeah, go ahead, Brian.
Has the applicant expressed any willingness to try to do the work this spring?
I think from what I gather, they want to go right out and get started on the work.
Okay.
You know, I don't think I heard anything like that. As with many construction projects, you know, they probably don't want to go out right before and survey, knowing that survey would potentially result in a halting of all of their plans.
Do they have other permits in hand? Local zoning permits, stormwater permits?
That was not, correct me if I didn't hear of any other permits we didn't discuss any permits at the SAG meeting, just this particular permit application. And
but so this is going to go through Act 250, right?
I'm assuming so. I'm assuming that's when Noel picked it up.
Did the bird SAG, I mean, would the bird SAG have a sense that were they to do the survey work this spring, that the project could go forward?
I think you've got to go to that concerns and question part. I mean, the survey data showed that there, at least I think it was 2 different survey points off of the area where the development was going to occur had grasshopper sparrows, and it just seemed like there was just a great opportunity for more or less on-site mitigation that could happen there. So that I think we thought was the best option. Whether or not that would be, you know, something that would be of interest to the applicant, I don't know. But the challenging thing about it is that the area where the grasshopper sparrow was detected on site is kind of like, you know, crappy grasshopper sparrow habitat. And you end up with, the mitigation is modest because it's mitigating for, what was it, 4 acres or 7 acres or something like that. It's not very much.
Yeah.
Yeah, and on the permitting piece, I can help clarify that, or attempt to help clarify that. The overall industrial park is subject to Act 250 land use permitting, and the hearing was just a few weeks ago. And Noel and Jen Mojo attended that, and VHB on behalf of the project has been closely working with them under the Act 250 criterion. And so in order for the Act 250 to be issued, all collateral permits need to be issued. There's stormwater, there's a wetlands permit, there's a sort of a whole slew of collateral permits that are needed. And where the grasshopper sparrow was observed, that's within the sort of overall project footprint, is just exactly what Alan mentioned. It's sort of a crappy unmowed field edge next to a ditch with a cornfield to the south, and kind of a ruddy 5-acre field-ish with some stockpiles of waste materials to the north. And the plan to develop that actual footprint for the industrial park wouldn't happen for a couple few years, that lot.
Oh, okay.
But what they do want to get going on, what they need to get going on sort of immediately upon getting all their permits issued, is to sort of cross to the north of where the observation is in that lot, in order to get to an area where they're going to have to blast to generate material and develop the overall water supply for the whole industrial park. So the sort of construction phase of the overall industrial park would commence, hopefully from their perspective, this summer, but the development of that actual footprint wouldn't happen for a couple of years. Yeah.
And this is kind of a weird map here. North is to the left on this map.
Yeah.
So it's a little odd. The airport runway more or less runs north-south. What were you gonna, Brian, did you have something?
Well, I'm just a little, I'm sorry, I didn't quite get all that, Carla. So they don't have their Act 250 permit in hand yet.
Because they need this one in addition to others.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, but then it does not appear, even if we were to, let's say we were to say, yeah, like we're okay with the takings permit here. They're still not, it doesn't sound like they're ready to charge right into this spring, or they will be.
That's right. Yeah, I think that the lawyers are forecasting a Act 250 permit issuance. I think the hope was by now, but within the next couple months or so. So that would potentially still leave them some construction season window to get going this summer if other permits issue.
Right.
I guess when we discussed it, sorry, go ahead, Brian.
Well, I'm just wondering whether that conceivably might allow for some survey work before they do anything over there.
Yeah, I think in our SAG meeting, that nuance there, I don't remember. I remember them wanting to start work, and I maybe just jumped to the conclude, that they were starting work on actually developing that site. But what you're saying is they're just looking for a right of way for vehicles right now to get through their site to other portions of the property that they're going to do various different things on. So this summer is just a right of way through.
Well, it's getting to the area where they're going to conduct the blasting, and their tree clearing would commence for the overall project footprint, and they're developing their own water supply that would provide water for the full industrial park.
Right.
So the sort of just to the north or left of where the yellow dot of the bird observation was made, and then to the right into the sort of long, narrow cornfield. That's, I think it's lot 8 and 9. 8 is on the north. And so the actual development of that lot 8 and lot 9 area is not anticipated to happen for at least a couple years, because they need to, generate the rock and create the water supply and everything before those lots could even support the infrastructure that would be built.
All right. I guess, and this is kind of interesting because when we discussed this, I think, and I think everybody kind of thought that and the impression that I got from John is they needed to get this permit, and that they didn't really want to change the timeline, and that they were going to develop that actual site, but that's not the case.
That's not the case, no.
Can you clarify where the blasting and stuff is on this map?
It's actually off of this map. The overall so this goes back to when 2021, when the survey was conducted. Natural resources and other studies were conducted on a much, much larger land holding by the Hershocks, the landowners. And then based on that and a number of other
It's this guy here.
engineering factors,
Yeah, that's
they're
grasshopper.
proposed to develop
Okay.
what's
Oh, I
inside the
see.
yellow line that we're looking at
Yeah.
here, as well as you can see the sort of yellow line that's extending off the screen down, which is the other portion of what is now being put forward as the industrial park. So a lot of the water supply infrastructure in the area where the blasting would occur is off of this map screen.
Oops, the other grasshopper sparrow
Sparrows are right.
location is sort of like over here.
Right.
On the other side
Yeah.
of 100 Coast.
Right. Go ahead, let's see, I think Matt and Roz, maybe you're up, Roz, you're actually number one.
Yeah, I think Roz was first.
Just to clarify, so it sounds like without the permit, which sounds like it'll be another couple months, they wouldn't be even building the road. Is that correct? The permit is needed in order to even get that access road going. In which case, it seems like that changes the equation a bit, that the area could be resurveyed, so that we can kind of get ready to meet and everything and schedule that so that we can act quickly after the survey is conducted. Because by mid-May, we should be able to survey the area and know whether that grasshopper sparrow is, whether that's there.
And that may, and knowing this now, that may change the SAG's response to this takings permit. Because I think everybody at the SAG meeting, which happened last week, was kind of under the assumption that we weren't going to have the opportunity to survey before work started.
Right, that's what we had
Well,
assumed too.
I mean, I think it's regardless of that, that was the permit condition, basically. We need more information.
Right.
Something that came up in the conversations that I've had with Noel about this. This might be too much information, what a TMI, but it was originally thought that perhaps the Act 250 permit could be issued with a condition subsequent. So the Act 250 could go ahead with a condition that, all right, you're gonna go out and conduct these surveys, bring the data back, and then get a takings permit, if needed.
Right.
And Act 250 does not like to do condition subsequents.
Right.
So the sort of whole approach to having a takings permit in hand based on the data that we have was then sort of what was selected and moved ahead. But during those initial conversations with Noel, an interesting question was brought up, is that because this observation was made in a not likely to support a grasshopper sparrow at, maybe a quick stop, but not a typical habitat, if then a survey came up negative, then does everyone walk away and sort of?
Oh, yeah. No, I think it's a great question.
Yeah.
I was going to say the same thing. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I guess I'm at a little bit of a standstill here because I can't speak for the SAG at this point in time. And it sounds like there is some additional information that, I could now relate to the SAG concerning. What do you think, Al? Does that really change because say Act 250, they still need to get other permits in place, and we have the opportunity to go out there and survey that site, and we don't find birds using that area. And this, again, discussion for the SAG, do we then say, okay, we surveyed no birds, it could have been 3 years ago, that was a fluke that you picked one up there. You can go ahead and start that process.
Yeah, you need to consult with your grasshopper sparrow conscious, Jason Hill.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Brian.
I'm ready to move that we table this and move on because it seems to me it's incumbent on the applicant now to decide on a plan rather than us. Like they don't have permits yet. And I don't think it's up to us to work out what their plan should be. Like I'd like to be able to approve a permit, or I'd like to see this industrial park go forward, but we just don't know enough now even to discuss it. You know, like there does need to be more survey work there. And if they want the project to move forward, that's what they should start to prepare.
That's pretty much what our thinking was at the SAG, Brian. Yeah.
Okay.
And again, you know, in terms of tabling it, we can't vote on it anyway now. So,
okay.
Because, yeah. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I guess I would just throw maybe a slight alternative to what Brian's saying is you can take the existing data, assume that that site is a good grasshopper sparrow habitat because there was a grasshopper sparrow there, craft an appropriate mitigation, assuming that it is a good site. And I mean, you could still require additional survey to inform it, but allow it to move forward on the assumption that that original observation was good and it is a good piece of habitat. I guess the vulnerability there is that actually the grasshopper habitat is even more extensive than what was originally found, and you're losing the opportunity to protect something larger if you move forward from the old data, as opposed to waiting, not finding something, and then losing any opportunity for any kind of potential mitigation. Just an alternative scenario.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, one of the challenges going that route is if you accept this as is, there's so little mitigation habitat there that it really amounts to, you know, almost nothing. Roz, go ahead. Did you?
No, I'm good. Thanks.
Okay. All right. I guess I'll agree. Let's table this and move on because we know we couldn't vote anyway, and we will we'll reassess with the full ESC.
So would you like me to bring this information back to the SAG and clarify, or should we? I mean, right now, our recommendations are based on us not being able to survey. I think.
Our recommendation is we need
more information, but our no vote is the fact that we thought we couldn't survey before the project started. In part.
Yeah, but I mean, I think you're going to get into do you want to actually do a conditional takings permit? I mean, that becomes that sort of same judgment as the Act 250.
Well, I guess, do you have a sense, Carla, of the timeline for that Act 250? Like if they get all their permits lined up and we're the last one they need?
I don't think we should not get into that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll table it. Okay.
Yeah.
Has this committee not run into a situation like this before where you need additional information in order to make a decision? And so you don't make any decision regarding a permit. You simply respond to the applicant. We need more information.
Yeah.
And then it's up to them to provide it or not.
I think that was the direction the SAG was.
We did it with the Danville, actually, and then they withdrew their application. So, yeah. So maybe we'll get lucky here. We didn't want an industrial park after all.
Just kidding.
So so we're tabling it. But as far as potentially surveying that area, and maybe that's not for now, do we have the developer using the same surveys techniques that they used the last time be responsible for that? Or do we look to have potentially someone who has permission and is knowledgeable about grasshopper sparrows go to that site?
I think we're getting too far into the weeds. I mean, I don't know, Jason talked a lot about how he would survey them
Okay.
at the last SAG meeting,
Okay.
so, yeah.
All right,
I mean,
then that's
I think
okay.
it's fine to reach out to the SAG and say what happened here. Does this,
Change
change anyone's
Okay.
thoughts about it? Because I think we're a week or two out before we have a quorum. In
Okay,
the ESC
so
to
they're-
vote anyway, so, yeah.
Okay,
And the surveys that were conducted within weeks or a month or two before the Fish and Wildlife Department's official survey guidance document came out. So in the years since that survey guidance document has come out, that is the
protocol.
that's what
Okay.
it's done.
All right, well,
We at least have that now.
I'll be in touch with folks, and Jason, I think already has, was planning on getting up there to take a look around, so, all right, tabled.
Okay.
I'll just point out, I mean, this does highlight the need for coordination between what the SAG's interests are and the department's role in the Act 250 process, which is always there. I mean, Noel's dealing with you, and Noel will deal with you on every project that you're involved in that goes through the Act 250 process, whether a T&E permit's needed or not. So there's always that part of it. We're going to be responsible for speaking to that issue regardless of what this committee decides. So I'm just pointing out the need for really good community coordination, because Noel is going to have to carry that forward in one way or another.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so my thought here is to just get caught up on some of the voting. So I would look for a motion to approve the 28 January 2025 meeting minutes.
We're right back.
So
All right, I will put a motion forward. I will be bold.
If I understood my role better, I would help you out here.
Yeah. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Any comments or edits? All right. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Excellent. And thanks again, Abigail. Appreciate your help.
And Stephanie abstains because I was not at that meeting.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. Eastern Meadowlark Recovery Plan. I would move that we accept the recovery plan, which will essentially be inserted into the grassland bird management plan, with a very slight friendly amendment to make pairs and individuals consistent in the executive summary and in the recovery goals.
Okay, yep.
And I have an amendment as well, and it's just regarding clarification that it's the Agency of Agriculture rather than the Department of Agriculture. And I think it's mentioned twice within the document.
Okay. Yeah, thanks, Stephanie.
Does it say?
Do I have a second?
As well?
What's that?
Does it say food and markets as well?
It does
Assuming
not.
It does not, yeah.
But you can choose to add food and markets if you wish.
Seconded with the 2 revisions method.
All right. Thank you, Carla. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Abstentions?
I was going to abstain because I hadn't read it.
Okay.
Abstain, Stephanie.
All right. Great. Thank you.
You still get the votes you need?
What's that? Yeah. Yep. We do for a little bit longer.
A few minutes.
Okay. Motion to list the elk toe mussel as endangered from the is put forward by the invertebrate SAG. Do I have a motion to move?
I'll second it.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. Any further conversation or discussion? toe mussel? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Abstentions?
Stephanie, thank you.
All right, thanks. Okay, application from the New Hampshire Academy of Sciences for collection of the Ram's Head lady slipper. We heard advice from the Flora SAG, and I think the only thing that the Endangered Species Committee was going to add to that was just to ensure when the recommendation for getting landowner permission to explicitly state that they are going to also say that this is a listed species in Vermont. So we would follow the Flora SAG with that small change.
Well, I'm not going to have any objection to this, but I'm sorry I wasn't there here when Grace was. I don't know if Grace was here, but Matt, maybe you might be able to. I'm just curious whether pollinators figured into the strategy for this species. I know it wasn't in the application. It wasn't anywhere, and I'm just kind of wondering whether pollinators might be a factor here worth, considering or investigating.
It's not something that came up at all in relation to this, the activities of this permit specifically. I mean, it certainly could be a factor in the larger declines of the species, but that's sort of like far beyond, I think, the scope of the particular permitting activities.
It would be cool in a population like this to look at.
Yeah, I have no idea what it is. I mean, I assume it's something a little bit bigger than mosquitoes in this case, given the lady slipper morphology. But yeah, I'm really not sure.
Yeah. Okay. Just curious. Thanks.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do we have a motion? Do we have a motion to approve the permit condition with a slight modification?
Yeah, I'll move that. You can have that motion for me.
All right. I will second. Any further discussion? All right. All those in favor? Approving the application with the Flora SAG conditions and ESC addition signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Abstentions? Here.
Stephanie.
All right. Okay. Then we've got the permit application for the harsh-leaf sunflower collection of individuals from a number of subpopulations. This was, the discussion indicated we were going to move ahead with the Flora SAG advice, and I don't think there was any other conditions there. Do I have a motion to approve? Okay. All right. I move to approve the application with the Flora SAG advice.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of the takings permit for the harsh-leaf sunflower with the Flora SAG advice signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Abstain, Stephanie.
Abstain.
We are kicking ass.
I am so
Good job,
glad
Mr. Chair.
Worked out. This Stromosis thing is going to get worked out. Will it?
Well, we'll see.
Okay.
Yeah.
It'll get worked out that you can only tell by genetic sequencing what you've got.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. I think, I mean, since we know we're tabling a couple of these, I think we're going to table the brook lamprey, and you'll send some slight revisions to the fish SAG advice. I mean, if we wanted to, essentially, if we wanted to vote on it now, we could, I think, because the ESC could add the advice about a qualified observer to be there. as well as invitation to bring the Conservation Commission and maybe members of the endangered species to help out after the dewatering. I mean, we could easily do that and just save you the trouble of going back to the fish sag. That's the ESC's amendment to your advice, and we vote on it now.
Or we could do a hybrid. I would feel better going back to the fish side.
That's totally fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So,
All right.
You can.
Okay.
Vote it. And yeah, I've also I don't have the actual data that's available from Fish and Wildlife Service.
Okay,
So
yeah.
I just emailed them.
Okay.
for that.
All right. Okay. That sounds good. So we'll skip that for now. And I had forgot about the unknown number, so it'll be worthwhile to have that in there. So.
Okay.
All right. Excellent job, everyone. You rock.
Oh, great leader.
Indeed.
Yes.
Okay, so my, again, I think where we go from here, we are not going to be able to come to a final decision on these last two, but my thought was to go into executive session so we could have a conversation about it. And then, you know, again, maybe talk through any of the details or any things that are still sticky. And then we're going to have to reach out to the rest of the ESC when we've got a quorum to actually make a decision. So I've forgotten the exact language, but I'm just going to move that the Endangered Species Committee goes into executive session to discuss permits related to sensitive species where we'd like the location to remain confidential.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? Okay, so I think then I think you're supposed to say the time at 1:41, we go into executive session.
And should they stop recording?
And we should stop recording.
And do you need us to stick around?
To adjourn.
And that one too.
I move to adjourn.
There we go. Thank you.
Second.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Okay.
We got a lot done. ESC, stay tuned. We'll have a little bit more work to do, but thanks everyone for your patience. Abigail, thanks again for your note taking.
Oh, to
I
put
might
it
have,
together
I
like
might
that?
have, I wondered if I,
Carla, can I plug it?
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Does it do that?